Members of the public, if you could please be seated. Members of the public, if you could please be seated. I have not used that thing maybe ever. I think that might be the first time. So, all right, everyone. Really appreciate it. I call this meeting to order. If you're able to do so, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. City Clerk, if you could please take roll call.
Yes, good evening. Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Present.
Member Bethel.
Present.
Member Pring.
Present.
Member Russell.
Present.
Member Ward.
Present.
Mayor Sierra.
Present.
6 present.
Thank you. Moving on to consideration of minutes from the previous session. Any changes to the minutes from the regular council meeting from April 6th? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the April 6th meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Could I get a second?
Second.
Thank you very much, Member Prang. Can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Aye.
Member Bethel.
Aye.
Member Pring.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Ward.
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes.
Thank you. Moving on to appointments, communications, and proclamations. Tonight, City Council is recognizing and swearing in our District 1 elected official. City Clerk, if you wouldn't mind just announcing the status of the election.
Yes. Based on official results provided by the Election Administrator, Community Resource Services of Colorado, the newly elected District 1 council member is Rick Summerson.
Thank you very much, City Clerk. With that, City Council, actually, I'll make the motion to certify the election and qualifications of the District 1 special election. Could I get a second?
Second.
Thank you very much, Member Prang. Any comments? Can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Aye.
Member Bethel.
Aye.
Member Pring.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Ward.
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes.
Thank you. Moving on to the next step, I'm going to ask our municipal judge, Judge Joe Jefferson, to come up to the podium if there's a few words that you want to state before we swear in Mr. Summerson.
State what a privilege it is for me to perform our swearing in this evening, and want to remind everybody that what we're gathered to witness this evening is the empowerment and the entrustment of a new individual with the inherent authority of the people. And without any further ado, Mr. Summerson, are you ready to take the oath or affirmation of office this evening?
Yes.
Okay, please step forward and raise your right hand and repeat after me, sir. I, Rick Summerson,
I, Rick Summerson,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States of America,
of the United States of America,
the Constitution of the State of Colorado,
the Constitution of the State of Colorado,
and the Charter and Ordinances
and the Charter and Ordinances
of the City of Englewood,
of the City of Englewood,
and that I will,
and that I will,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
faithfully perform
faithfully perform
the duties of office
the duties of office
as a council member
as a council member
during my continuance therein.
during my continuance therein.
Congratulations, Councilmember Summerson.
Thank you.
We're going to step aside to do it in writing to make it extra official here, sir. Actually, they've got the old version. This copy. That's why I bring it extra. Thank you. Congratulations again, sir.
Councilmember Summerson, before you take another step, if you wouldn't mind joining the rest of the council up on the dais. Congratulations. let's just double check beforehand. Perfect. All right, I think we're good. Member Summerson, just give you a few moments if you wanted to just say a few words before we get started.
Hi, thank you. Good evening. I'm Rick Summerson. First, I'd like to thank the voters of District 1 for voting for me. You have put your trust in me, and I look forward to working for you over the coming months. Next, I'd like to thank my mom, Joan, and my dad, Richard. Many of you might recognize my mom from knocking on over 400 doors with me in March, or maybe you've seen her line dancing at the Malley Center when she's in town. I owe them everything for always being there for me and building the foundation of who I am today. Thank you to my friends and family in Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, California, Texas, Michigan, Arizona, and Ohio. You all know who you are. And thank you to our friends and community in Englewood, both new and old. Jacob and I are very thankful for the relationships we have and hope to build. To my LGBTQ plus brothers and sisters, I see you. I hope that someday one of you will stand on my shoulders the way I'm standing on the shoulders of the queer folks that paved the way for me. And lastly, to my husband, Jacob, you are my rock, my cheerleader, my champion, my everything. I'm not up here without your unconditional love and support. Thank you again to everyone that made this possible. I'm excited to get to work, enthusiastic about our future, and excited to continue building community with each of you.
Those are nice words. Congratulations, Councilmember Summerson. Thank you so much. All right, with that, everyone, we are now moving on to recognition. So tonight, City Council is pleased to recognize the graduates of this year's Elevate Englewood program. This 9-week program gives residents an overview of the 4 sectors of civic life and equips them to better understand, navigate, and influence how local government operates through active community involvement and engagement. Before we announce the graduates, I'd like to share how Council appreciated the opportunity to meet with this group earlier this year in late February. This cohort represents residents who deeply care about the community and are eager to play a more active role in shaping Englewood's future. I also want to thank our City Manager's Office staff for their efforts and our partner agencies that help present the many aspects of civic life in Englewood. So I think City Clerk, you'll be reading off the names. I think Jackie, you'll be handing out handing me the certificates. We're going to call you one by one. We'll take an individual picture, and then at the end, we'll have all the council come up and take a group photo at the end. So with that, I'll just go up to the front of the podium.
All right, so we'll start with our graduates. Adrienne Walsh. Andrew Forlines. Bryce Orblum. Christopher Underwood. Craig Skinner. Daniel Haran. Emily Gonzalez. Jenna Atkinson. Jesse Gordon. Julia Hudson. Julia Porter, Caitlin Hines, Kayleen McCrum, Matthew No, Matthew Schultz, Matthew Wettingell, Miriam Ruth Behill, Neil Kabarek, Rachel Nicolason, Rich Vedas, Sarah Burke, Shanna Garcia, and Tiffany Kapler.
All right, everyone. We're now moving on to agenda item 8, which is recognition of public comment. So there were a few changes made to public comment after the second reading a couple weeks back. So first things first, I want to make sure I just read it so that there's no. All right, so obviously we're going to be going through public comment. We may ask questions for clarification, but there will not be any dialogue. Please limit to your presentation to 3 minutes. There will be 90 minutes total for public comment. Englewood residents must provide their address or cross street. Non-Englewood residents must provide the name of their city. If you have address council in the last 90 days, you will be moved to the bottom of the list. Any written materials must be submitted to the city clerk in advance or at the meeting. AV materials must be submitted to the city clerk by 5 p.m. on the Friday prior to the meeting. If you'd like to speak virtually, please reach out to the city clerk's office for a link. The deadline is noon, the day of the meeting. You may also sign up in person prior to the start of the regular meeting with the desk in the back. The other aspect that I did want to state that's a little bit different is that we are moving council members' choice to after public comment. So you may hear each of us speak after public comment is given. And with that, I will start with the top name on the list. So we have LD, a D1 resident of Englewood. And I believe they may be online. Do we have anybody online at the moment? If not, we may come back at the end. No? No one's online, so the first.
No one's online at this time.
Okay. All right, so we'll just go to the next name on the list. We have Kathleen Bailey, a District 4 resident. Good evening, Ms. Bailey. When you're ready, you may begin. Yeah, there you are.
Does it?
Yep, you're good to go.
I am here tonight to ask council to deny City Attorney Niles' corrupt ordinance CB 26 and keep our existing process for initiative, referendum, recall, and ballot title selection in place. The Colorado Constitution that you all swear to serve still protects the people's rights of initiative, referendum, and recall to put a check on runaway governments that don't listen to their residents. That your city manager, Lewis, felt free to ignore state law 2 years in a row to achieve his goals while your city attorney, Niles, quietly supported him is corruption. And the depth of that corruption is seen again in Niles' ordinance. Niles' ordinance ignores the state constitution that protects residents' rights of initiative, referendum, and recall, and instead she seeks to deny residents those rights by intentionally placing roadblocks to collecting the required number of signatures for a ballot measure. To create the first roadblock to collecting signatures, Nile eliminates our current process in which our elected city council members select the ballot title after all of the required number of signatures have been collected. And she replaced that with requiring a 3-member ballot title committee consisting of the city clerk, the city attorney, or their designees, and a third-party election expert who will now select the ballot title at the very beginning of the process before any petitions have been circulated to collect any signatures. And if the resident petition group doesn't agree with the ballot title that this committee selects, the petition group is simply denied and prevented from going forward to collect any signatures, period. And the only recourse Niles provides after committee denial is for the resident petition group to file a protest, which then requires a hearing to be scheduled and held in the form of a quasi-judicial hearing, during which time petitions cannot be circulated and no signature collected. To create the second roadblock to residents collecting signatures, Niles' ordinance allows if a petition signer simply makes an accusation of being misled into signing a petition, that accusation alone without proof is considered sufficient to stop the petition carrier and send that petition carrier before a municipal judge to defend themselves against that accusation, during which time no signatures can be collected until the accused petition carrier proves their innocence against an accusation. And by not requiring proof of being misled, Niles also opens the door for Sean Lewis supporters to sign petitions for the sole purpose to then claim they were misled, sending petition carriers in front of a municipal judge instead of collecting signatures. Please deny City Attorney Niles' corrupt ordinance, CB 26, and keep our...
Ms. Bailey, your 3 minutes are up. Thank you very much for your time tonight. Any questions from members of council? Ms. Bailey, thank you for coming tonight. Up next is Andrew Forlines, a District 4 resident. Good evening, Mr. Forlines. When
Hello.
you are ready, you may begin.
All right. Thank you for your time tonight, Mayor, council members, and city staff. I'm Andrew Forlines, a resident of District 4 and the founding member of the Bellevue Park Neighborhood Group within the City of Englewood's Neighborhood Resource Program. I would like to take a moment to thank you and the city for providing our group with a 2022 Neighborhood Improvement Grant, which and give you an update on that project. With that grant, we funded a custom fabrication and installation of the sharing box in Southwest Greenbelt, which is east of Rotolo Park. This is a weather and animal resistant metal cabinet that is meant as a place for community members to share shelf stable foods, toiletries, and children's school supplies, among other things like clothing and boots. It has been well received by and embraced by the community around it. Neighbors take it upon themselves to stock and clean the box regularly. My wife and I, when we have time on Tuesdays, go to food distribution by Kaizen Food Rescue. They load us up with surplus food that we're able to stock it with. Recently, our friend's child's birthday party included a tour and going down to the box. So instead of gifts, they asked people to bring shelf-stable food, and then all the kids were able to walk down and fill that box. We've hosted events there. Pictured on the handout I gave you was our pumpkin carving party, annual pumpkin carving around that box, where we encourage people to come and bring supplies. This project has demonstrated the need for community resource sharing and highlighted the limits of existing support systems. There are a lot of people who have taken upon themselves, and we do stock it as best we can, although it is continually, those resources are used. There's a great need in the neighborhood. And the limits of our distribution, we really need a more structured support or network linking together food rescues and food distributions. In my opinion, we need a better organized resource collection and distribution system that includes centralized physical hubs in our region. I'm also a member of the Arapahoe Food Security Coalition for several years now, and found my current job as the executive chef for Nourish Meals on Wheels through the coalition itself, where we serve 800 meals a day to send out to community members. And I do invite everyone to come tour or work alongside us as we do that. We service Englewood and the majority of South Metro Denver. But that coalition is working on creating a food hub that would be a centralized location for donation reception from community members and other organizations, and then a single distribution point, which would service the whole surrounding area. So I thank you for the time and appreciate all the work that you all do to make the community the best it can.
Mr.
Thank you.
Forlines, thank you very much for your time tonight. Any questions for Mr. Forlines? All right, seeing none, thank you very much for your time tonight. Up next, actually, I'll just verify. Ms. Garcia, you did not want to speak, right? We canceled out the name. Okay, perfect. Moving back up to Mr. Benjamin Ben David, a District 1 resident. Mr. Ben David here. I don't see him in attendance. All right, we'll move on to Candace Rutledge, resident of Littleton. Good evening, Ms. Rutledge. When you are ready, you may begin.
Can you hear me? Hi, my name is Candace, and I'm from Littleton. I'm a street cat there, and I often come here to hang out in the library. And I've noticed some disturbing security protocols that I believe are not very good for people. I wrote to the clerk, council, and the manager of the city about this. Security will knock often loudly with a solid object, banging on the door of the bathroom, and then announce that they are security, open the door before or after saying so, and often try to hurry or rush people along. Sometimes this is done with guilt or leverage or shame deployed around the custodian is waiting when the janitor can come back after cleaning work elsewhere. Oftentimes it's a male officer beating on the women's restroom, which is disturbing. I've even been in a stall myself when this has happened, and you know it's disturbing when you're sitting on the throne and someone's banging on the door of the bathroom suddenly. There are plenty of female librarians who could check the women's restroom if we're worried about people staying in there too long, and then we could call security if that's an issue. I already mentioned myself. The lady might be bleeding and need more time. Anyone might suffer from irritable bowel syndrome or other conditions that need more time. Someone might be applying makeup or doing something sensitive around their eyes and be startled and jump and then hurt themselves. This disruption to the peace and quiet is disturbing, intimidating, megalomaniacal, and unnecessary. And just to have someone use the bathroom, someone of the same sex too, would be nice for someone to go check it out instead of all of this unnecessary drama. All right. And then also in the library, I guess I've been told that there is no physical copy of the state revised statute, which I think is something that usually the main library of a city usually keeps. So that's something to consider.
Ms. Rutledge, thank you very much for your time. Actually, before you go, any questions for members of council? I was going to say I may also have one. Member Prang, go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Rutledge. I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. Can you give us a sense of how often you've experienced this in the bathrooms?
I've been in the bathroom one time when this happened, and then usually it's when I'm out hanging out around the computers. I've seen it happen at least 3 times. And then the time that I wrote it up on the 16th of this month was when they were kind of hassling someone in the women's restroom, and I'd had enough of it.
Okay, thank you for that answer.
Yep.
Ms. Rutledge, I have one question for you. Actually, maybe 2. Are you being told that this is standard practice?
Yes, there are placards in the bathroom. If you go down there and walk into them, it'll say that they're doing wellness checks or something
Okay.
like that.
Right. And then how much time do they give after the knock? Is it just
I have no idea what the time frame is.
no, I mean like when they knock, are they walking into the women's bathroom when that happens, like immediately afterwards,
they open
or
the door, but I don't think they walk
Okay.
in unless somebody doesn't respond. But it's still kind of disturbing,
Okay.
and it disturbs the peace in the library because
No.
it's louder than anybody else.
That's a good point. Ms. Rutledge, thank you very much. I see no further questions. Thanks for coming and speaking tonight. I'm going to go back to those online. Is LD online, or do we see anybody, either of the 2 speakers? No? Okay. All right. With that, then, that concludes public comment. And with that, I'll just open up to the floor and see if anybody wants to start off with council member's choice. All right. Wow, Mr. Summerson, I see you reaching. We'll give you the honor for the first council member's choice. Go ahead, Mr. Summerson.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor. I have 2 items I wanted to bring up tonight. Both are things that I have witnessed as a member of the audience here in the chamber, and then brought it up a lot in conversation in the campaign. I know my opponent as well also had a town forum on the issue of flock cameras and ALPRs. So I am interested in moving forward with terminating the flock camera contract. And I think there's a number of reasons why, one being that Flock has proven itself to not be a reputable company. I think Englewood should do business with reputable companies. And I think that Flock cameras themselves are a distraction that aren't letting us get to the work of putting in the proper guidelines for data surveillance, protection, and security with our new Axon system.
Thank you very much, Mr. Summerson. There may be a little bit of conversation about that topic. Was there anything else, just that one item?
I'm sorry. I have a second item. The second item is I'm hoping to work with my colleagues on the dais to work on how we might consider a prohibition for data centers and detention centers within city limits of Englewood.
Thank you very much, Member Summerson. We may come back to those 2 topics here in a second, but anyone else for council member's choice? Go ahead, Member Frank.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to further make some comments to Ms. Rutledge. I am frustrated to hear of your experiences in our library. I do know that we have, a new director and staff that are very committed to serving patrons of the library in an equitable way. And I certainly think that this is a conversation that city manager can have with the staff of the library. I feel for you. I have a child who experienced some of this type of behavior in high school, and just, being able to use a restroom undisturbed is a basic human right and human dignity that we should be mindful of. So I really appreciate you bringing this forward into our attention. And then secondly, I just wanted to highlight to my peers on the dais, we did receive some answers to follow-up questions that I submitted regarding the audit of the flock access audit, I guess. I encourage all of you, if you have not read that, to read through that in detail. And I think that it is important information to have in mind when we have our May 11th conversation. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Go ahead, Member Bethel.
I just want to take an opportunity to comment that removing a response to public opinion and replacing it with council member's choice is not our goal to not respond to the public comments. So in response to tonight's discussion, I want to thank everyone that came and spoke to council. Ms. Bailey, I don't always agree with what you say, but I do agree with you coming and presenting your opinions. I know that it's difficult to come before council and express yourself, and I appreciate you being here, so thank you for that. Mr. Forlines, thank you for the hard work that you're doing in your community, bettering your surroundings, putting in the work, and building your community. I think it's really fantastic, so thank you for doing that, and thank you for coming tonight to present. And Ms. Rutledge, thank you for coming tonight to tell us about your experience. Thank you for coming tonight to tell us about your experience. I appreciate you coming in and letting us know the conditions in the library and what it feels like to be a member of the library and to use that facility. So thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Member Bethel. Mayor Pro Tem, go ahead.
I wanted to get one other thing. I appreciate Member Summerson bringing up some potential action for City Council, and I certainly agree with. I would want to join with him on the flock camera contract. I'd be interested in eliminating that as well. I would also add one more request to get on our radar as a possibility, and would request council's feedback on this. I've gotten some feedback from some citizens, especially as people have kind of got a sense for the cost of building ADUs, had some requests for considering council making space for ADUs on wheels, or like tiny houses on wheels and those kind of things. So I'd like to get that on council's radar as a possibility for future legislation.
Thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem. I think I'm going to come back to all the council on the 3 items here. So anyone else on council member's choice? I'll chime in as well. So Ms. Bailey, thank you very much for coming and speaking to the petitioning process that is on the agenda tonight for second reading. Obviously, I'll have some questions to that effect when it does come up for second reading, so I appreciate you coming and speaking to that item. Yeah, Mr. Forlines, thank you very much for how you've taken advantage of our some of our community grants that we made available, and just sharing how you have made that successful. Oh, there you are. I know I saw you on the left-hand side. No, but appreciate just the successes that you've seen, and it does sound like this is something that you would like to see us scale across Englewood, because there is obviously a bigger need for this as well. And Ms. Rutledge, thank you very much for coming and speaking to your experiences. I do want to get a council request on this item and just find out if there's a better way that we can be handling the situation. I know that we've had issues with in regards to what's occurred in some of the library bathrooms, but there should be a better process for what you experienced. So just want to get a little bit more information on what the current process is and how we can make this a little bit more comfortable for any patron that happens to be using our bathroom. So I do want to bring a couple other things up to the attention of council. So to continue on with council member's choice, we do happen to have that the Dartmouth conversation regarding the roundabouts that potentially are going in on Downing as well as Logan. I saw the first social media post that went out today, and I'm hoping that we can be a little bit more specific on what the May 5th meeting is. Right now, it's just being branded as a traffic calming town hall, basically, or just like an session. But it's really about the roundabouts, and I want people, if they hear traffic calming, they may just think it's bike lanes or something that may not be very. This event is specifically around the roundabout. So I would like just to have communication around the fact that, hey, there's 2 potential roundabouts coming in. I want to make sure that the public is aware that that's exactly what we're speaking of during the May 5th meeting. So if we could get a little bit more specific, I'm hoping that the literature that we send out, we're expecting to send out 2,300 mailers to people in and around Dartmouth. I'm hoping that it's not too late for us to send it out with specific information about the fact that it's about the roundabout. So that's one thing that I want to bring to the attention of staff. The second is we can kind of speak about this as well, but City Manager Lewis. But the other thing, and I'll bring this to the attention of council, and I may ask for just movement on this as well. So during the traffic calming town hall that we did happen to have back in March or early April, I can't remember the event, the timing, but we basically presented where some of the problem areas are. We received feedback from members of the public on where they see some of the issues. But I'm really hoping that we get to a point where we actually get a little bit more granular about what the actual plan is for specific infrastructure, such as speed bumps or some of the more traffic lighting or whatever it happens to be. I think right now, like I'm hearing from citizens that want to see more speed bumps around parks or around schools where there's kids and there's a greater population that is actually walking into specific areas. I just don't know what the timing of when these may be considered is, and I would like to have that visibility. I would like for Public Works at some point, and they could tell us what the time frame is because I know they have a lot on their plate, but I want to get more specifics on when we are going to put in specific infrastructure that is not necessarily, some of the hawk lighting or some of those other things. I'm speaking of speed bumps or just something that's going to just slow people down within problem areas. And so with Logan Bates Park or Bates Logan Park having or seeing the improvements last year, we're just seeing a lot of kids on bikes, a lot of families going into that area. And it just seems like we should be doing something about the fact that the population of that area has, or the people that are moving into that area or walking into that area has really increased over the past year, and I really wanted to see what our plan is for actually slowing cars down. So I just want to see if members of council are also in agreement with that so we can have staff look into that type of thing. Anybody in disagreement with getting more specifics on speed bumps or that type of thing? Okay. Go ahead, Member Russell.
I'd like to ask some questions because I think the situation about roundabouts and what's coming forward on that is pretty timely. But I think a lot of the other things that you have brought up is nebulous, and council has not seen an update on when these things are going to happen. And my understanding was if anybody in their neighborhoods wants traffic calming there, I would definitely like to know what the plan is and how it's going to happen, because it can't just be nebulous.
Right. So regarding like speed bumps or other traffic calming measures, speaking outside of just the roundabout on Dartmouth, correct? Member
Well,
Russell?
I'm not, yes, as far as the update, but I think that the meeting that we're having probably only will deal with the roundabouts.
That's correct. It's only going to be about the roundabouts, yes. But yeah, so you're in agreement with what I'm asking, just more of a time frame for what will be going in.
Right. And I have one other question about the roundabouts, because I would like to know this. What you suggested is that we're deciding whether to put them in. I really haven't felt that way. And I felt like this is a done deal, and once we get the citizens on board, then we'll just move forward.
Yeah.
So I want that clear.
So the reason why I state that is that it still has to go in front of council in order for a final vote on the final design of the roundabout. So there is funding available for it. We have that as part of the budget, but whether or not it moves forward still depends on council approving in the majority the roundabout. So it's still going to come in front of us, Member Russell.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I think that was it for my portion. Member Bethel, go ahead.
Just out of curiosity, how long has council been discussing roundabouts on the Dartmouth corridor?
Since either 2020 or 2019, somewhere around there. It's been about 6 years.
And how many votes have there been?
There's been votes along the way for the design, for some of the grant approvals, 3 or somewhere around there. There's been some.
Okay, and I assume that all of those votes have progressed in some way?
Correct.
Towards where we are?
We moved it to where we are today in terms of final design.
That was my clarification. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Member Bethel. All right. I'll go back. So actually, I'll answer the first question from Mr. Summerson. So terminating the flock contract, just know for members of council and for staff as well. So on May 11th, we are going to be having a discussion regarding the different types of surveillance that we happen to have in the city. So that will include the flock cameras, that would include Axon, and I believe we're using Motorola for the drones. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but also the other types of surveillance that we're using as part of the city. That is going to be the very specific aspect of May 11th. There's going to be a separate discussion that we will have regarding the data, the actual surveillance and how we're capturing information, the audit process, that type of thing. That's going to happen at a later time frame. But for May 11th, if that's when we choose to direct staff to no longer use Flock or Axon or whatever, that will happen during the May 11th meeting. So for Mayor Pro Tem and for Mr. Summerson, just know that we will have that as part of the agenda for May 11th. And that would be part of the discussion point. So any questions on that? Go ahead, Mr. Summerson.
So I'm
Member Summerson, sorry.
It's fine. So on May 11th, we will also be able to hear or have a presentation on what would happen if the block cameras were not there, and what the police department's response to that would be.
Correct.
Okay.
And this is something that I probably need to speak to our city manager and our police chief. But yes, the expectation is to get a better understanding or for them to provide an overview of the discussions we've had over the past 6 months or so about the I believe there's 3 different ones, Block, Axon, and Motorola, and have them provide our viewpoint of what would happen if we were to cancel one or the other, and just provide that information for the members of the public so they're well aware of what the pros and cons are for us moving in a specific direction. All right. So any further questions on that? And then regarding your second point, Member Summerson, do you mind if we get a council request? I don't think we've done a council request on what the current code is for allowing data centers within the city. I don't think I've seen that one come across. So can we enter that as a council request, get a little bit more information, and then we can decide then whether or not it merits a study session to understand what needs to happen if we wanted to move in that direction? Okay. Let's enter in that as a council request. And then lastly, Mayor Pro Tem, the consideration of ADUs on wheels. So this would have to be a specific code change. I'm trying to think. We have something coming up regarding state laws. I'm trying to think of where we could fit that in. But go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, I did ask the city attorney, and I know their city attorney's office is researching what sections of code would need to be changed. I do believe there's a Title 16 piece, but this would be, I think, something that happened after this state law thing, because we're having a public hearing on that tonight and then voting on it at the next regular council meeting. So it's too late to get into that round.
Yeah.
But maybe a study session if there's interest from council in the next maybe 2 months or 3 months.
Yeah, I'll ask that question and we'll figure it out. I guess I was thinking about like the non-conforming residential. That's the other item that we got. So that was that. So maybe we could bundle in with that. But I'll just ask council: are we okay with adding that as part of a future council's study session regarding mobile ADUs? I'm not sure what to call them, but I see head nods, 5 yes. Go ahead, Member Russell.
I just have a question. If they're mobile ADUs, does that mean they can park on the street or in the parks or wherever they want?
Do you want
I would just say what I'm requesting, allowing this on private property, so it wouldn't particularly be allowing them on streets.
Yeah.
That would be a separate discussion if we want. I would consider that, but I'm mostly interested in people having them in their backyards, that kind of thing.
I would say that would be a little harder pill for me to swallow for that piece, but I'm fine with having that conversation.
Well, we could have that conversation, but then that opens the door for something we are already prohibiting. It is not okay to live in a travel trailer on your property. So what would the difference be?
That would probably be part of the code information that's coming from the city attorney, but it's a good point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Russell. All right, I think I covered everything. Any other questions regarding council member's choice? Oh, go ahead, Member Frank.
Thank you. As part of the discussion on ADUs on wheels, just if we can make sure that we get a lot of detailed information on the nuances between, an RV that someone's trying to consider an ADU versus, I have definitely stayed in Airbnbs that are mobile ADUs that are parked in someone's driveway. And it was a very pleasant stay, and I could see it being a very doable thing. But just to get a lot of specifics around the different types of ADU on wheel to consider, and then all of what Member Russell brought forward as far as the specifics of where it can be parked and how it would be managed. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, anything else? All right, thank you very much, everyone. That concludes council members' choice. Now moving on to consent agenda, and I didn't write down the ones that we pulled tonight. Hold on one second. Let's see here. So we pulled 9B1, and I believe it was 9A1 and 9A2. Remember, Praying? Was it just those two, or was there another one? I'm trying to find your email. Why can't I find your email?
9B1, Mayor.
I'm sorry, what's that?
9B1 as well, please.
Yeah, 9B1, 9. Okay, so it's 9A1, 9B1, 9C2, was it? Remember, Praying? Okay. All right, so I think I got this clear. So with that, everyone, are there any other consent agenda items to pull? If not, can I get a motion to approve 9A2, 9C1, 9C4, and 9C5?
So moved.
Thank you, Member Praying. Could I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Ward. Can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson,
Aye.
Member Bethel,
Aye.
Member Prang,
Aye.
Member Russell,
Aye.
Member Summerson,
Aye.
Member Ward,
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
Thank you. Moving on to 9A1. Member Prang, you have a question regarding the updated IGA with Arapahoe County for public safety radio usage. Chief, oh, there you are. Chief, I think we may have a question for you. Member Prang, if you wouldn't mind asking a question.
Thank you. It's really more of kind of a timing technical question on the contract. So I was just wondering, I noticed in our IGA last year and then again with this year, we're kind of really behind the ball as far as the timing. So the IGA itself gives an effective date of January 1st, but we're executing much later than that. Last year it was in June. Now here we are in April. So just wondered about the timing on that and just if we can, moving forward, get that in front of us, or is there a reason with Arapahoe County that we can't get it by the 1st of the year?
Absolutely. Those are great questions. Those are great questions and questions that we also asked in email. We received this on March 10th of this year, and I spoke with the city attorney's office this afternoon as well, and it was similar last year. I'm not really sure why we're getting them a couple months after the effective date. We have asked, we asked them or advised them that we would not be able to obviously have it done by January 1st, but also they had given the date of April 10th to have it done, and we explained to them the process that it would not be done by April 10th. They were very receptive. In full disclosure, I did not reach out, or I did not press the issue as to why it's coming in late, but they did kind of amend the IGA this time to make it the automatic renewal, and I'm not really sure. I think that will resolve this issue, but I agree with your assessment that we're getting it late, and I'm not really sure why.
Yeah. I appreciate that, and I'm assuming the county doesn't always have forthcoming answers on items like this. I guess my request would be that we make the effective date in the IGA the date that the mayor signs the agreement. I don't think that backdating contracts is a good practice, and so that should be a simple change with them, and that also might encourage them to get it to us sooner.
I did speak to the city attorney's office about that also, and I think I agree. I think that is not going to be a difficult change. I will say, and I may defer to Jackson for just a minute about the 60-day before it is approved. That may have to be the January 1st.
So the function of the auto renewal will be 1 year from the effective date, which you're saying will be when the mayor executes. We have 60 days before that auto renewal, which will be 365 days after execution this year to then notify Arapahoe County that we won't be actually renewing via the auto renew. And so our proposition would be to 60 days prior to auto renewal, put on the agenda for mayor's choice or something to review that contract, make sure we still want to be engaged in it. So it's functioning like an auto renew, but it's still in front of council every year.
Yes. Yeah, I appreciate that. I don't anticipate that we would ever really kick this agreement back and not renew it, but just to create consistent processes and as far as our contract renewals and having asked that in other areas. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Prang. Member Ward.
I concur with the concern that's been brought up by Member Prang, but realistically speaking, what option do we have? This isn't really a contract that we could cancel and still keep our city safe, is it?
Not sure if anybody's ever broached that. Yes, I think that I would hate to even venture a guess as to what would trigger we couldn't use this anymore. I think that we have a very strong working relationship with Arapahoe County, the 911 authority. I think that we keep a very positive relationship with them, and I don't see an issue moving.
This agreement facilitates mutual aid. Is that correct?
Yes.
Among other things, but that's the primary purpose.
It's one of the, I would say the primary purpose is simply dispatching calls and having the officers' ability to speak to one another.
Okay, so we buy radios, but this contract lets us use them?
It allows us to access the, I'll say, network or the radio program that is facilitated and managed by the county.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Of course.
Any further questions for the chief? If not, can I get a motion to approve 9A1?
Move to approve 9A1.
Thank you very much, Member Prang. Could I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Russell. Any further comments on this? All right, seeing none, can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Aye.
Member Bethel.
Aye.
Member Prang.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Summerson.
Aye.
Member Ward.
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
Chief, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Moving on to 9B1. Member Ward, you have a question for Director of our South Platte Renew and Utilities, Peter Van Bry.
No questions, Mayor. I pulled this when I saw it on our agenda tonight because I think this, among the many things that we do and that our staff has done this year, needs to be recognized publicly. We've talked about it a couple of times, but tonight is the culmination of the work that our utility staff has done to literally bring in $8 million that this city would not have otherwise had. So I would like to publicly congratulate Director Van Rye and his team for his work, and thank you for your diligence in finding the proverbial money under the mattress and working with Mile High Flood District to bring that in.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Ward. I also just want to highlight Deputy Director Stone, who was very active in this process, and the partnership with Mile High Flood to be able to make this possible. I think their creativity along with ours is what is making this possible. So we appreciate the support of council.
Thank you very much, Member Ward, and thank you very much, Director, and your team, as always. Any further questions or comments from members of council? If not, I'll go ahead, Member Summerson.
Just a quick question. When is the board vote? Do we know when the board vote is for Mile High Flood?
So the Mile High board actually voted in February to move this money into the account that we would then send the invoice for. So once this IGA is completed, then both parties sign the IGA, waits the 30 days, and then once all that's in place, that's when we'll send an invoice. So the money's actually is in the account over there waiting for this all.
Great, thank you.
All right. With that, can I get a motion to approve 9B1?
So moved.
Thank you, Member Ward. Could I get a second?
Second.
I heard Member Bethel. It was a little louder. All right. Any further comments? Seeing none, can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Aye.
Member Bethel.
Aye.
Member Prang.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Summerson.
Aye.
Member Ward?
Aye.
Mayor Sierra?
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
All right, thank you. Moving on to 9C2. Member Praying, you had a question regarding the motion for applying for the RTD partnership grant in the amount of $300,000 with a 20% match. We have our development manager, Mr. Slate. Good evening. Member
Hi.
Praying, you had the question. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Slate. So I have kind of twofold, and I was tossing around whether to pull one or both of them because there's kind of some overlapping pieces. One of my questions I have is around the disruption from the Old Hamden Complete Streets project. And so we had what looks like a year and a month worth of disruption to us being able to collect data, analyze that data, to be able to inform kind of how we want to move forward with either keeping the expansion of the hours and or moving toward a on-call model or adding that. So how is that going to be any different now? Like, what can we do to mitigate the situation of the fact that we're going to have continuing time period where there will be disruption on Old Hamden? And are there any implications to the grant funds with that ongoing disruption?
Yeah. Good evening, Council and Mayor. Will Slate, Economic Development Manager. Thank you for the question. So the main thing that we are going to benefit from is that the ongoing Complete Streets work or the Complete Streets work that will start is not going to be at the same impact level that the infrastructure work was at, in which we saw a full closure of the road going both. To our current knowledge, there'll be no full lane closures on Old Hamden, and so we won't have as much impact to the service standards for the fixed route. And then as additional context, we were awarded the grant in 2023, which ran from 2024 to 2026 for these expanded hours, but we didn't finish procurement and put new wheels on the road until March. So we haven't really had a chance to test it in a great environment. And so while we do have the rest of 2026 and it's actively working right now, we have to make a decision. Do we have enough data to want to continue this service, which we don't have sufficient data. So this grant will allow us to have more time to not only run the service without the infrastructure project, but to enhance our marketing, work with MB, the contractor, on the headway times, and do more community engagement events with Craig and Mally.
Okay, that is helpful. And then my second kind of, I guess, it's not really a question, more of a wish, is that on the grant where we're applying for monies to look at an on-demand model, do we have to use the Dr. Cog data to inform our need? Or can we use the Dr. Cog data and determine our own need? And I ask that because I have a continued interest in us creating an on-demand situation for people that need to get to a grocery store, having, the loss of Safeway and nothing in the near future that we're looking forward to.
Yeah, again, a great question. And the Dr. Cog data tool that's part of the RTD grant application is what they use to quantify the need. So it's an informational tool. It doesn't necessarily have to guide our service design. It is 15% of the scoring rubric for the grant. So overall, of all the components included, it is a big piece. But it is a portion of it. Again, it will inform us, but at the end of the day, the design of the service, who it serves, and the types of trips we're trying to capture is up to us and the needs that we see in our.
Okay. That's helpful. So I'm happy to continue to apply for it. And when do I continue to put pressure on staff to consider on demand for grocery store travel? I mean, is that if we receive the grant, I'm assuming, we have good standing with RTD and we've received these grants in the past. So I just want to continue to advocate for that and wherever I can, if needed, come in and have direct conversation with staff to explore what your current thinking is around that need. I, would like to see that specifically focused on seniors, but available to all. So,
and we very much appreciate your advocacy and support. It makes it more impactful for these pilot programs.
Great. Thank you for your time tonight.
All right. Any further questions on this item? All right, seeing none, can I get a motion to approve 9C2?
Move to approve 9C2.
Thank you, Member Praying. Could I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Any further comments? All right, can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Aye.
Member Bethel.
Aye.
Member Prang.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Summerson.
Aye.
Member Ward.
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on to 9C3. All right, Economic Development Manager Will Slate. Not so fast. Member Prang has a question for you regarding the RTD.
I think we covered
yeah.
both areas.
I was going to
so
say, I think
I'm happy to move 9C3 if we
all right,
don't
I thought the
have any
second
further.
question was part of this
Yeah.
one, right? Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Member Prang. So we have a motion to approve by Member Prang. Could I get a second?
Second.
Thank you very much, Member Bethel. Thank you, scared off Mayor Pro Tem. Any further comments? Any further comments on this item? Seeing none, can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Aye.
Member Bethel.
Aye.
Member Prang.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Summerson.
Aye.
Member Ward.
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
Perfect. All right, that concludes consent agenda items. We're now into public hearing. Are we good to continue or do we need a break? All right, we're going on. All right, we're gonna open up the public hearing on the newly enacted state laws pertaining to housing and related Title 16 amendments. Can I get a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you very much, Member Summerson. Can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Aye.
Member Bethel.
Aye.
Member Prang.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Summerson.
Aye.
Member Ward.
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
Perfect. All right. So I think anyone that is going to be speaking on this item, anyone that's going to give going to give comment to this item from the public, if I think we're going to go ahead and swear you all in. If we could just do it. Is there anyone online for this item?
No.
No. All right. So anyone that's planning on speaking on this one, if you wouldn't mind just raising your right hand, and City Clerk, we will have you swear them in.
All right. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in this matter now being heard by the Englewood City Council? Great. Thank you. Please state your name and title for the record, please.
When you come and speak. So with that, we will start off with Director of Community Development, Brad Power, as well as our Planning Manager, Mr. Brian Isom. Good evening, Mr. Isom.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, we're here to present Title 16 amendments for zone case or case 2024-04-A. These are regarding accessory dwelling unit regulations, landscape provisions, and our definition of house. So a brief recap of where we've been. We adopted Title 16, the revised Title 16 in 2023. Strategic growth laws were adopted by the state of Colorado during legislative sessions in 24 and 25. We've been before you with various sections of these state laws, and tonight we're coming with certain few Title 16 amendments regarding 4 state laws. With that, I'll just jump into what the recap of these amendments. So for Chapter 4, these focus primarily around the accessory dwelling unit regulations. The majority of these are to create compliance with the city for state law HB 2024-1152, and then a few others are more in line with what we had a study session in late January, talking about the height of ADUs above garages. That makes us those probably more easier to get constructed. So the first of these amendments would clarify interpretive issues on lots that allow for multiple ADUs, restructure regulations for size, height, setbacks, and parking for all ADU typologies into a table format. So that's moving all of our regulations about how big they can be, what the parking requirements are, into one table. Makes it easier to read for the public. Renumbering current table 4-4 to 4-5. So the creation of the new table pushes the number of the old table back one. Removing primary design compatibility language. This is something that comes out of the House bill. It requires us to remove any language that anything that wouldn't be required for the primary structure to be removed from the accessory dwelling unit. including language regarding ADU allowances in existing and future plan unit development, and including language regarding housing that is prohibited to be used as an ADU, such as motorhomes, multi-purpose trailers, recreational vehicles, and mobile homes. Chapter 5, we have an amendment that would allow or give the ability for front corner lots, rear corner lots, and courtyard pattern lots to have accessory dwelling units. Clarifying interpretive issues regarding allowed quantities of minor accessory structures. So on two structures for lots less than 10,000 square feet and 3 for lots greater than 10,000 square feet. This is already something that is done by staff interpretation. We're just clarifying the language around that. Table 5-3, we're adding a new row that would point back to the ADU standards that are now in 16.4.4b. Removing the phrase, but no higher than the principal structure. This is part of our study session a few months ago. Provide additional note that ADUs can be combined with other accessory structures, and each portion square footage is counted independently. We run into that issue when somebody is attaching one to a garage. We want to make sure that it's very clear that we count those separately. Removing clearly incidental and subordinate language, and removing any building or structure over 12 foot high and over 200 square feet shall be compatible with principal building considering material, architectural standards, architectural elements, windows, and door details, and meet the design standards in EMC 16.5. Chapter 8, this primarily focuses on the landscaping provisions, so the creation of prohibitions for non-functional turf, non-functional artificial turf, and invasive plant species. This new language would prohibit the installation of non-functional turf, non-functional artificial turf, and invasive plant species in new and redevelopment of public and institutional, commercial, and manufacturing uses, common interest property, interest ways, parks, and other common elements, new apartments and mixed-use developments, and street rights-of-way, parking lots, and median. And then we would renumber the administrative section of that chapter to make room for this section. Chapter 13 focuses on new definitions that go along with these revisions. So a new definition of ADU, so an accessory dwelling unit, would be an internal attached or detached dwelling unit that A, provides complete independent living facilities for one or more individuals, B, is located on the same lot as a proposed or existing primary residence, C, includes facilities for living, sleeping, eating, cooking, and sanitation. We would also be revising the definition of household. This is primarily for House Bill 2024-1007, which states that we can't regulate the occupancy of a home based on familial status. So this removes any references back to familial statuses or any kind of relationship, and just focuses on a household includes one or more persons of any relationship living together in a dwelling unit. Occupancy would be regulated through our property maintenance, which we have been doing since last year. The last provisions added are new definitions to that focus for the landscape. So invasive plant species, artificial turf, functional artificial turf, non-functional artificial turf, which all reference back to the state that we're enacting. And with that, staff is available for any questions.
Mr. Isom, thank you very much for that presentation. We'll start off with Mayor Pro Tem.
My question is on those definitions of the functional and non-functional turf. Would turf that somebody puts in their yard or a play area count as functional turf?
So for someone's front yard, a single-family home, that's not part of these provisions?
That's not a part of these provisions.
It is part of the law that was passed in 2025 that all cities look at regulating turf in single families or artificial turf or non-functional turf. That's something that we weren't quite ready to have a conversation with you all yet until we saw what other communities were doing. So this would get us most of the way there with those laws, but then that piece would follow.
Okay, thank you.
Member Bethel.
Member Anderson, because I also was curious on that, in my reading, turf for play areas is functional turf.
All right, Member Pring, go ahead.
Thank you. Appreciate the presentation, and I'm sure you're very happy to be moving some of these forward. I did have a quick question on the ADU piece. Let me see if I can get the citation of the area. It's on page 271 of the packet in section 16(5)(b)(2)(1) for accessory buildings. There is a change here from 10 feet down to 5 feet. So the accessory building shall be at least 5 feet from the principal building or other distance specified by applicable building codes based on fire ratings of adjacent walls. So can you just talk to us a little bit about that change? I just think of 5 feet and wanting to make sure, for situations like if there was a fire or just safety of people on that property or being able to get to and help people on that property. Are there certain situations where like our fire marshal would come in and say, no, it needs to be greater than 5? Like what is the thinking on the change from 10 to 5?
That's a great question. So the provisions exist to, at least in our code, to tell people that they should separate their buildings. But if they do certain things like fire rate their buildings, they can actually get them closer together.
Okay.
So we've moved it down to be more in line with what the building code says, which is 5 feet. But that's it. If they fire rate, they can get closer together 5. If not, then they have to back. So we're leaning more towards what the building code requirement would say, rather than dictating it through zoning code, but then allowing an exception.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Thank you. My next question, or I guess this one is just a comment. On page 285 of our packet, let me try to get there. There is a section, well, in the table 5.9, and then just below there's a couple of highlighted in yellow sections that I think need to be finished up. So before this comes to us for our first vote, I'm hoping that those highlighted areas where we are saying we need to complete our list of sources and stuff like that will be finished up before we look at this for a vote, correct?
So those actually aren't part of our public hearing. Those have been in there since the adoption of the revised Title 16. It's something that would come forward as once the council has chosen their affordable housing policy direction, we would start crafting language that goes back in there.
Oh, got it.
Most of
Okay.
those have been placeholders since 2020.
So they're purposefully left that way
Yes.
for now. Got it. That makes sense as well. And then one other thing. Page 293. I just was wondering how something was defined. I was just wondering if non-functional was defined somewhere and if it's necessary to define it. It's referenced throughout this section, and I know that I wouldn't pick this up and know what non-functional turf means, and so I just didn't know if that's something that people do know, or if it's something that we can weave a definition in somewhere.
So we did include definitions of, functional turf, functional artificial turf, non-functional turf, non-functional artificial turf. They all reference back to the state statutes. The state statutes seem to change quite frequently now.
Got it.
And we want to
Okay.
make sure that we're not having to come back every year and updating our sections just to be reflective of those. So wherever the direction those change, we kind of follow. But yes, it is defined in our code.
Okay, that's all I had.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, thank you. My question, Member Prang had asked about the distance between the primary structure and ADU, a minimum of 5 feet. We also allow for attached ADUs. It brought up a question in my mind at what constitutes an attachment?
That's a great question.
Maybe that's a building code.
Is
That a building code
and,
question? I don't know.
That's probably not something I want to answer without our building official here.
Okay.
We have folks that try to attach buildings in a myriad
2
of
by
different
4
ways with arbors, sections of roof, small doorways that have no function other than trying to provide some attachment between two structures. So generally what we're looking at is there's structural attachment to these buildings, and they're not just done through a breezeway. Have things like that.
Got it. Okay.
Proposed quite often.
All right. Any further questions from council? All right. Thank you. City Clerk, I didn't receive a sign-up sheet. Did anybody sign up in favor or
We did
against
not have
public-
anybody sign up, and
Anyone online?
nobody is online to provide comment.
Okay. Well, I'll ask the public, is anybody wanting to speak on this public hearing? All right. Ms. Bailey, if you want to come and speak, I think. No, Ms. Bailey, yeah, if. So I saw that you did raise your hand to get sworn in. So if there's anything specific that you want to oppose or be in a favor of.
No, actually, I wasn't sure what this was about, but all the questions, this is very clear, and all the questions that you guys asked made it even more clear.
Okay.
So I don't have any.
Okay.
Thank
I appreciate that, Ms. Bailey. All right. With no one else, I'll just ask one more time on members of council if there's any further questions. If not, I will ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you very much, Member Ward. Can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Aye.
Member Bethel.
Aye.
Member Prang.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Summerson.
Aye.
Member Ward.
Aye.
Mayor Sarah.
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
Thank you very much. All right. Are we good to continue? Let's.
I would request a short break.
All right. Short break, meaning 5 minutes. Let's take
5
a
minutes
5-minute
works
break.
for me,
All right,
but
everyone.
I can't speak for anybody else.
All right. So this is 8:17. If we could be back around 8:22, we will pick up 11A1. Thank you very much. Members of council, if you could please be seated. Members of council, if you could please be seated. All right, members of the public, we are now back. We're moving on to agenda item 11A1. This is the chronic nuisance regulation. We have Assistant City Attorney Jackson Higgins. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is going to be mostly a review because of our study session in February, but after our study session came a few comments from you all, so there's a couple changes I'll point out to you as well. We'll start with a review of what chronic nuisance abatement is in the first place, a review of your comment. We'll outline updates we made accordingly, and then we'll request you vote. Again, this does not come with the formal recommendation from staff in front of you as an option. To remind you about the general framework of nuisance abatement, they are tools for municipalities to prevent and remediate recurring violations. They don't necessarily create new violations, but they create a way for the city to track and enforce properties specifically that are allowing repeated violations of both physical and behavioral nuisances on their property. They can hold property owners accountable for activities or conditions occurring on their property, even if they're not the direct violator. So that's where it differs from other sections of code. So this doesn't replace, for instance, the code prohibiting theft. That will be handled the same way it is now. But let's say there's a property that has a certain amount of thefts and is allowing them without mitigating risk of repeated thefts, then this chronic nuisance ordinance might come into it. A chronic nuisance property is a property that enables repeated nuisance activities, and that can include, like I said, both physical maintenance issues and behavioral nuisances. The causes are failure to maintain property, failure to respond to emergencies on property, and lack of adequate surveillance. So that's what we're trying to address, because we think that the effects of those causes are disorderly conduct, harassment, disturbances of peace, property crimes, and repeated code violations. And the impacts, when we allow these causes to continue, are impacts to neighborhood safety and livability, and burdens on police and code enforcement, and then property value erosion. These are your comments from February 24th. We discussed the need to input discretionary administrative fines, and then that also we tied that to there's a cost to the city incurred by enforcement of this ordinance, and so we view the imposition of administrative fines as a way to mitigate that cost that the city takes on. And then you asked how vacant properties are addressed specifically, so I'll address how we changed the ordinance to address that. And then you asked what specific violations constitute nuisances under the chronic nuisance ordinance. So I'll clarify that as well. This would be the abatement process as it's updated. Again, most of it's review. There's a warning notice that's provided to a property owner when it's at risk of becoming labeled a chronic nuisance property. Again, the intent here isn't to catch anyone. The intent is to inform property owners. We want to assume that they don't know what's going on in their property. So that's where this notice comes into effect. And further, once the notice of chronic nuisance designation is provided, and that's once the threshold is met, the owner is required to submit an abatement plan within 10 days of that notice. So again, what we're assuming is either the property owner doesn't know what's going on in their property, or they do and they just don't know how to fix it. And so we want to be creative and we want to be collaborative with the property owners and assume that they want to resolve the problem. Then there's an abatement agreement. The city gets to decide what an adequate agreement looks like, what sufficient agreements look like. This was drafted broadly because obviously issues of physical property maintenance gets addressed far differently than repeated criminal conduct on property. And so the city and the property owner have discretion in addressing how those appropriate behaviors are being addressed. Then the city enforcement comes into play. They may abate directly if the nuisance persists and the owner is unresponsive. If they don't follow their abatement agreement, that's when city enforcement comes into play. And then the cost recovery piece, this is the additive from last time. The administrative fine is imposed and all costs for city abatement are passed to the owner. And that's the same as our current nuisance abatement statute works. So, not questions yet. We'll go through the changes. If you would, in the definitions section, go to section B, chronic nuisance property. To address the vacant property issue, we changed from residential property in section B1 to real property, including an improved or unimproved parcel. So vacant properties would also fall under this piece, on which 3 or more nuisance activities occur within a 90-day period, or 5 within any 12-month period. And so all we did there is loop in vacant properties with single residential property. And then again,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Jackson, what was that section? What was it? B1?
15.1 to B1. That real property is the difference. It was residential property.
Okay.
And real property, including an improved or unimproved parcel, would envelop both residential properties and vacant.
Okay.
And then we will go on to the definition of nuisance activity. This, I want to point out again, is where we enumerate all of the criminal conduct that falls into nuisance activity that would create a chronic nuisance property. We wanted to enumerate all of these because we had to take out certain criminal conduct to protect victims of crimes. And then all physical property maintenance issues would also fall under nuisance activities per the ordinance. The change from last time here is just that we condensed, if there was a state statute that matched the Englewood Municipal Code, we put them in the same. That's why. And then to point out why it's much longer than you saw it before, as a part of the code cleanup project, we reviewed and we took out any definitions of words that either weren't in the title or were only in the Title I. And so that's why you'll see lots of changes to the definitions. We wanted to leave it better than we found it, make things clearer. And so those are all non-substantive changes from last time, but that's why there's so many edits in the definition section, just a part of the code. And then I'll take you down to 15.3.8, abatement of chronic nuisances, section A5, administrative fine, and this is an addition from last time. For purposes of defraying administrative costs incurred by the city upon designation as a chronic nuisance property, the city may, that's the discretionary piece, serve a notice of administrative fine to the responsible party and to assess an administrative penalty in the amount of $500 for the first notice of designation to the responsible party and up to $1,000 for successive notices. The fine shall be stayed upon a timely appeal and withdrawn by the city following a successful appeal. So at any point, a responsible party can appeal their designation, and they would go through the hearings process that you all just approved and would be effective by the time this was effective if you were to pass it. This also addresses some of the teeth issue of getting people to comply with the code. This gets people bought in further than just the imposition of an administrative or of a abatement agreement. And those are the substantive changes from last time. I also just mostly wanted to give this time to you all for discussion, and if you had any questions, I'm here to answer.
Thank you very much. Mr. Higgins, any questions for members of council? Go ahead, Member Russell.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So in this list of criminal activities and other nuisances, are we intending to address criminal activity through an administrative hearing process and administrative fines?
No. Thank you, Member Russell, for that question. What this ordinance is seeking to enforce is getting property owners to not allow these behaviors to occur on their property. So it's not the criminal conduct itself. The theft that I mentioned earlier gets called to the police come, and that gets charged to the person committing the theft. If we're finding out that someone is not calling the police intentionally, they know what's occurring and they're not calling the police, and they're not doing anything to abate those things from occurring on their property, that's where this ordinance comes into play. So that's the behavior that this ordinance regulates. The property owner who's allowing this behavior to occur knowingly and not doing anything about it.
Okay, so the property in question that we've been looking at on South Lincoln Street, people have called the police. Does that mean the police are going to start addressing the criminal activity that's occurring on that property?
Enforcement of the criminal activity that's occurring on property should not change. The police will answer phone calls. Again, part of this ordinance is encouraging people to call the proper law enforcement immediately. If they do so, that is part of what takes them out of a chronic nuisance designation. It's encouraging vigilant phone calls for emergency services, and this shouldn't change the operation of those emergency services.
Well, and that's a little bit troubling to me because this property has been a problem for 15 years and the police have been called. And I have one other question then. How does House Bill 261250 deal with this? Procedures related to civil asset forfeiture. It says, this bill clarifies an existing requirement for criminal conviction of an owner by requiring that one or more criminal charges must be brought as a prerequisite to any nuisance abatement or forfeiture proceeding. This bill, there is an exception in current law, but this bill will repeal that law, which means a criminal conviction would be necessary for abatement. How does this interfere with our law, and how do we know it's not?
I see. So I have not reviewed this, just so you know, but based off of what you're presenting, where I think it might come into play is our proof of nuisance activities. If someone is criminally convicted of conduct on a property, we can treat that as fact that that activity actually occurred. But we can also prove outside of criminal charges that that criminal activity occurred for the purpose of counting that as nuisance activity that would fit under a chronic nuisance property. So I imagine if this were to pass, one way we could resolve the issue is require that, I mean, like the bill says, require that in order to count a criminal activity as nuisance activity, bless you, as nuisance activity, then we would be required to prove that it was charged successfully and that someone was convicted of that criminal behavior in order to count it as nuisance activity.
If this were to pass, why wouldn't we consider tabling this and looking to see if our law is impacted by this?
Certainly an option.
Okay, those are just the questions that I have for right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Russell. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Higgins. My question is, I got two questions actually. The first one is, how does this apply if criminal activity is happening adjacent to a property and the property owner doesn't want, but it's related, perhaps could be argued that it's related to activities on that property, but it's not happening on the property.
Yeah. So if you go to vigilant parties, and let me find what section that is, 15.312, limitation of enforcement. So when I said this ordinance seeks to regulate the specific property owner that knows that occurring, isn't calling emergency services intentionally, and isn't doing anything to abate things in the first place, this is where that comes into play. We will not take action against this person under a statute who is acting on the behalf party or someone acting on their behalf promptly reported the nuisance activity to the appropriate law enforcement agency, and at the time the activity occurred, the responsible party had reasonably effective means in place to prevent such activity, and they weren't the ones actually causing them. So I assume in the hypothetical that you mentioned that this person is calling emergency services are not the ones actually committing nuisance activity, and they're reasonably trying to prevent these if it's happening on their property.
Okay.
So that would not be enforced.
Or adjacent to
It couldn't be enforced against someone who this stuff is happening adjacent to their property.
Okay.
It would have to be on.
Okay, it has to be on the property.
Yeah.
Okay, the second question is, I know under our current nuisance ordinance, it has on occasion elevated to where the property's been condemned or something like that. Is that possible with a chronic nuisance?
I see. It would not change any enforcement mechanisms under current code. So if that's happening under current code, it wouldn't change with this. That could still occur. But the intent of this addition is to create the administrative fine, the abatement agreement, those additional steps. So if city abatement looks like condemnation under current code, then that's That would not change.
I guess what I don't understand is how our current nuisance ordinance has gotten gets to that place where the abatement is property condemnation.
I understand the question you're asking,
Yeah.
but I don't have the.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Summerson, or Councilmember Summerson, sorry.
My question is on 15.3.8. One of the things that I've appreciated is that there is a lot of good faith attempt from the city to work with good faith property owner. But on that particular number one, the warning is not required to be sent, and I'm curious as to why we wouldn't require us to be able to provide that warning to a property.
Of course, that came from there's a chronic nuisance property designation if there's 2 drug-related activities occurring on a property. And so what that would mean is anytime there was a single one, we would have to be aware of that and give notices or warnings out every time there was a single drug activity on property. So if we wanted to do that, we could, but that's why this is permissible. Is in execution, we did not want to limit ourselves so much that we're sending out warnings to every property that a single drug-related activity was occurring. But of course, we would be open to either making it a mandatory warning or changing. Maybe we warn people if they're if they're at risk of becoming chronic nuisance outside of the drug-related activity, or however else we would want to address that creative field.
Thank you. I would be interested in finding where we might have a requirement. I think it's a step the city should take in letting a property owner know in advance of the moving into an abatement phase.
Great.
Any further questions from council? Go ahead, Member Pring.
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation. Couple of quick questions. One, once a property has been identified as a chronic nuisance property, then the clock starts for 10 days for the property owner to come up with a plan. If, for instance, in one of the examples that you provided, someone maybe is having challenges in being creative and coming up with that solution should be, are city staff made available to that property owner? And is there an exemption or a flexibility within the 10 days to allow for that person to work with the city? So they say, I really need some help. I'm at a loss. They don't have those skills, whatever, and I would like to work with the city staff. Do we then kind of reset the clock and from when that person can work with the city staff?
Yes. So to answer the second question first, we are allowed to extend that 10-day period based on a property owner's willingness to comply. And that is when city resources would become available. If someone is struggling with, I don't know how to abate these things, I don't know where to start, but I really want to, the city obviously would not enforce that 10-day, well, you didn't give us an agreement in time. They would instead make themselves available and try to come up with some creative ideas because it's supposed to be a buy-in from property owner as well as.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then my other area of curiosity is around in the weeds section. And there's I guess it's S3, any rank, unmanaged, or overgrown vegetation that obstructs visibility. So would this mean, like, say for instance, there's a property that sits on a corner and there's hedges. And I know that there are plenty of places like this in Englewood where you can't see around the hedges properly to like feel safe to cross a crossing street. So is that included in here? And kind of talk to me about how that would be handled. Where would that be reported? Seems in some ways a silly way to identify a property as a nuisance property, but I guess if they've been contacted and requested to have that pulled back for the safety of the public driving down the streets, then it makes sense to me.
Okay. I'm so sorry because I thank you for identifying this definition because it is one of the substantive changes. That wasn't code cleanup. It was this current draft of weeds came from Code Enforcement or Code Compliance Advisory Committee and is currently in front of Planning and Zoning for the same definition in Title 16. And so this is the most current draft that went from CCAC. So they have the expertise and historical knowledge to know why and how this was drafted, and it's now in front of planning and zoning for approval. It's a long way for me to tell you that's why we put it in here in Title 15, because we wanted those to match, and this was already in front of you. That's why I can't answer exactly how or why they came to this definition of.
Okay.
I can answer the process, Mayor. Member Prank, in terms of if you do see that, you can obviously enter that through Inglefix, because we already have the provision that allows us to go out and compel the owner to trim back that hedge if it's in the site triangle. And so anyone can turn that in through Inglefix. You can email me about just the corner or the location, and I can get that turned in as well.
Okay. And would that be a similar notification to our weeds in the alleyway naughty letters that we get? I am including myself in that letter receipt each year.
It would.
Okay.
Same
Great.
process.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions from council? I have one, Jackson. So I know we're talking about property owners here specifically, but if the perpetrators of the nuisance were to move from one part of Englewood to another, does it start over? Does the clock start over, or?
It is specifically tied to the property itself. And
Okay.
so we would again rely on the other enforcement mechanisms for whatever that individual is doing to follow them.
Right.
But the chronic nuisance follow them.
Okay. So there's just a separate process that.
There's a natural incentive, I think, for property owners to be aware
Right.
of these things and not bring people in who are known to be causing nuisance activities on the property. Because of this now ties in those property owners, but it would not aggregate or jump.
Makes sense. All right. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Member Russell.
Thank you. So back to the weeds thing a little bit. Is it currently law? I mean, even though it's before planning and zoning, have we currently voted this into law?
I imagine this change would then change the definition in Title 15, and then you would see the change from Title 16 once it goes through planning and zoning and then back. So this would hopefully match that definition, and that's why we put it into Title 15 now.
I think your question is it part of code today?
Yes, that is it, or is it something new that we're doing, and why are we doing all these new things and not in order necessarily?
So the way
That's
that
what
I'm understanding, Jackson, that weeds wording is currently part of code. Yes or no?
One second, I apologize.
Because I think that's the question. Is it currently part of code?
Right.
As I understand it, this is not currently a part of either the Title 15 definitions. It's a change to the Title 15 definition, and they're looking at a change to the Title 16 definition. So it's not currently a part of it, as I understand it.
Mayor, could I weigh in? This
Yes.
is Tamara.
Thank you very much, City Attorney Niles. I knew you were online. Go ahead.
Yes. So it is currently in municipal code that it violates section 15-6-1 to have weeds in excess of 6 inches in height on your property. So all of this it does is change the definition of weeds. And as Assistant City Attorney Jackson Higgins just stated, because we were changing the definitions anyway, and there's already been a proposal to change the definition of weeds, that's why we inserted it now. It's not actually related to the chronic nuisance ordinance, but we were already changing this section, so we inserted the definition that your board requested.
Thank you very much, City Attorney. Member Russell, do you have any further comments on that or questions?
I do have a problem that in the paperwork, the definition is in here, even though it hasn't been approved. I understand the 6-inch part, but that's crossed out in here. That part is crossed out, and we're looking at adding this new definition, which needs to be done first. What if we didn't pass or planning and zoning didn't pass what they're talking about? Thank you.
Yeah. Since the city attorney, Higgins, do you have any response to that? Because I do understand the issue here. If it's not currently part of code, why would we have the new wording that hasn't been approved yet?
Of course, and the rationale is, as City Attorney Niles mentioned, is that we were touching Title 15 now, and this was a change that was impending for Title 16, so we put this in front of you. I should have identified specifically that that was a substantive change to a definition, but we could take that out of this ordinance and bring it forward once Planning and Zoning approves whatever version of the definition they do in Title 16.
Yeah, I think that would be a little bit cleaner just based on where we're currently at with the process with weed. So, okay. Any further questions for members of council? All right, seeing none, can I get a motion to approve 11A1?
So moved.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much, Member Bethel. Any further comments for members of council? Go ahead, Member Russell.
Actually, I know that this has been worked on for quite a bit of time by the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee outside of the purview of City Council, which the thing that is a little troubling to me is the fact that the state is discussing a law that could impact this law. And also we have definitions in here that were, if we pass this, we probably are going to have to go back and address it again. And we have so much stuff in the code. Once we've done it, I just, I think it would be wise for us to table this to put everything in a specific order.
Thank you, Member Russell. Any other comments from members of council? Go ahead, Member Pring.
I actually would support the notion to table this. I feel like there is a right process that should be followed, and we're kind of muddying the waters a little bit here. I'm fully in support of this ordinance, but I do want the pieces to be corrected where they need to be corrected so that we're passing an ordinance that's clean and it reflects everything correctly in 15 and 16.
Thank you, Member Prang. I understand where the concern is with that you're bringing up, Member Russell, Member Prang. My preference would not be to table this item. I just think that I understand the question. It's just I think we're at a point that I would like to move forward, but I understand the concern. So I'm kind of weighing on that aspect of it, that maybe there's some language that needs to be cleaned up that gets it to a point where we're able to, just have the right wording as part of the ordinance. I get that piece, but I just was hoping to get to a point that we can pass it tonight. So I guess I'm wavering on the fact that I want to get it passed tonight. I just understand the importance of this chronic nuisance regulation. I'm not as concerned about the House bill that's currently going through the process just because they haven't passed it either. I do want the weeds aspect taken out of this item, so that would be something that I do want to amend, but it does sound like there's other aspects that need to be amended as well. So, but I'll let the rest of the council weigh in as well. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
What are the aspects that are besides the definition of the weeds that are concerning?
There were a couple other ones, Jackson, right?
The substantive change that I had pointed out was maybe requiring a notice for warning rather than making it permissible. If there's any other changes, I didn't.
Okay.
And then the weeds one would is just has a definition that hasn't been updated in Title 16.
It hasn't been approved yet.
Hasn't been approved. Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the problem with that? Is something not enforceable, or it's just inconsistency between 15 and 16?
So we could have different definitions, 15, 16, and that would be fine. This was just an attempt at knowing that it was coming forward in 16 shortly, and we're in 15 now. It doesn't affect enforceability, in our opinion. It wouldn't change substantively the function of Title 15. But we could take it out, and it could be different than Title 16, and it would be fine as well.
That just is kind of a timing issue, or if the Title 16 one doesn't pass, then we have an inconsistency in definitions between titles. So then we may want to come back and if for some reason that doesn't pass, come back and amend this. But I'm kind of okay with that. You know, that would be, I would think, I'm wondering if tonight we could get away with the one amendment for requiring the notice, and then if the Title 16 weed change doesn't happen, then just put it on the calendar to come back and amend this one to be consistent with it later. Would that solve the problem?
Maybe it would. I have one other question if I could ask.
Of course, go
What
ahead.
I'm concerned about also in this is due process. Because now we're moving to an administrative hearing and not going to a court of law to confiscate someone's property. I mean, ultimately, that would be the goal if I'm assuming our goal right now is to get them to come into compliance. But if they don't,
So can I speak to the due process question? Or?
Yes, please.
Okay. So a part of this allows us to seek a court order for compliance. And that would happen here in municipal court. And then there's also, let me find the section really quick because there's a standard of proof that we include as well that specifically is written to address the due process issue to ensure that the same standard of proof applies to civil violations that it would otherwise, and the same burden of proof applies to criminal activity as it would otherwise. So we have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that criminal activity did occur. If it already has been prosecuted and charged, then we can take that as a fact that it was already prosecuted, proved beyond a reasonable doubt that criminal activity did occur. So then we don't impose an issue of due process by saying something happened without proving it.
Okay, that answers that question. Can we enforce like 15.3.8? I think it's 2B. Yes, a directive that the responsible party respond within 10 days with a written abatement of nuisance plan. Can we actually enforce that?
The enforcement aspect of that is if they don't, then the next step gets invoked where the city can step in and abate, assuming, and because the city gets to then assume that the property owner is not going to work with them on an abatement nuisance plan. The plan is like an out for how the ordinance is structured. The process would go from a violation to a notice of violation and then to city abatement. But that in between that allows the property owner to get out of that process would be giving us a plan and saying, well, we want to work.
Okay, I know what we want to do as the city. I just want to make sure that the people's rights are protected. I mean, that's our job. And I get this. So the amendment, well, we don't really need to take an amendment. We've already had a commitment to remove that part from the definition of weeds.
I think it'd probably be best if we do have a motion to amend to remove that portion.
Okay.
Got it. And to revert back to what was already in Title 15.
Yeah.
For sure.
Correct. All right. Thank you very much, Member Russell. Member Bethel.
Mr. Higgins, or Attorney Higgins, Assistant City Attorney Higgins, Deputy City Attorney Higgins. Thank you.
Assistant. Yeah, I'll go by anything. It's okay.
Can you help me understand the process of a municipal fine on a property? Because I assume that's what we're looking to implement here, right? If they don't pay their fines, then the city steps in and abates the property. And I assume the property owner is then in debt to the city. The city places a lien on the property.
The city is allowed to place a lien on their property as they are under current nuisance abatement statutes in our code. So,
excellent. And then over a period of years, if that lien goes unpaid, does that lien go then to Arapahoe County?
I'm sorry, I cannot answer that. I know that the city's right under the lien stays there until the property is sold. I'm not sure about the reversion to Arapahoe County or how that plays out. But I'm sorry, I can't provide clarity on that.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, I just want to, in my understanding of how liens work, it's a debt on the title of the property. And when the property is sold, it has a super priority so that the city gets paid before a mortgage does. And that's the power of a lien. If in certain cases a lien goes unpaid for a certain number of years, it can go to a tax sale depending on the regulations of the county or the state. I believe Arapahoe County has a minimum of 4 years before a tax sale can occur.
So I was
But
I
please
was
go
just
ahead.
going to share what we were told in the code compliance advisory committee by the code compliance officer, that when Englewood abates, the county actually pays Englewood the money. The county is holding the lien on the property. So it's not the city.
That would track with how most counties operate then.
Okay.
All right. Any further questions from members of council? If not, we do have a motion on the table. Can I get a motion to amend from member of council? I guess, what was it?
I would like to amend remove the weed definition.
Thank you very much, member
All
Ross. I
right.
can remember
Thank
what
you.
it was,
Mhm.
so I think that's enough clarity for you, Assistant City Attorney. Yeah. All right. Can I get a second on that?
Second.
Thank you very much, member Pring. All right. Can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson,
Aye.
On the amendment.
Member Bethel,
Aye.
Member Prang,
Aye.
Member Russell,
Aye.
Member Summerson,
Aye.
Member Ward,
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
Thank you very much. Anything else, members of council? So that was just the amendment, removing the weeds. All right. And with, yes, please. Do you-
Microphone.
I turned it off, sorry. Quick clarification, the motion is to remove the amendment to the definition of weeds and
Revert
to
it back.
the old definition.
Yes. That was the amendment. Sorry, I should have been a little bit more specific. Member Summerson.
Just clarifying if we needed to do the same thing for the amendment to the requirement. 15831.
Yes.
Do you have that number? Do you want to make that a motion to amend? Member Summerson?
I move to amend 15381 to require written notice.
Thank you very much, Member Summerson.
Second.
Can I get a second? Thank you very much, Member Pring. All right. Can we please vote on the amendment?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson,
Aye.
Member Bethel,
Aye.
Member Prang,
Aye.
Member Russell,
Aye.
Member Summerson,
Aye.
Member Ward,
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
All right, I think that should cover everything. Anything else, members of council? If not, can we please vote on the motion as amended?
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Anderson,
Aye.
Member Bethel,
Aye.
Member Prang,
Aye.
Member Russell,
Nay.
Member Summerson,
Aye.
Member Ward,
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes and 1 nay.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Assistant City Attorney.
Thank you.
Higgins. All right, we're moving on to Council Bill 35. This is to amend the Englewood Municipal Code for water use restrictions and water waste. We have our Director of Utilities and South Platte Renew, Peter Van Rye. Good evening.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Okay, so we're here tonight, I'm here tonight to present some municipal code changes to help strengthen our ability to impose potential water restrictions in light of the current drought that we're in, and just really to update some of the language that's been in place for several decades. So some background, I think anybody who's been paying attention realizes that we've had one of the worst snowpack years ever. So we have really low snowpack, which, you know, most of the Front Range water supply comes from that snowpack. You've been watching, many cities have been implementing mandatory restrictions. Some have been implementing voluntary restrictions. From our research, we have not been able to identify a time in the past when Englewood has implemented mandatory restrictions. We've been told that there have been a few opportunities where voluntary restrictions were implemented. And so as we were looking at this, we started looking at this in the January, February timeframe as we started to see what was happening with the snowpack and the potential that we were going to be in a pretty significant drought. And in our discussions with the city attorney's office, really looked to ways in the code to be able to ensure that if we wanted to move forward with any kind of enforcement relative to watering restrictions, that we had the clarity in the code in order to do that. So the recommended code changes include clarifying the authority, strengthening the enforcement, and enabling drought response. So these are the sections that are proposed for change. Section 12(1)(a)(6) establishes mandatory enforceable water use restrictions. It allows stage restrictions, levels, implementation by resolution or administrative order, enforcement by the utilities director. Section 12(1)(a)(7), violations of restrictions is equal to water waste, and then that's subject to penalties. Section 12(1)(a)(9) clarifies authority to shut off water service for violations, and 12(1)(c)(8) establishes water use restrictions to customers outside the city limits receiving Englewood water unless otherwise specified by agreement. And so those are our extraterritorial customers that are outside the city boundary. What we're actually proposing for this year is a voluntary conservation approach, which is consistent with what we've done in the past. So we're proposing voluntary restrictions of outdoor watering of 3 days per week, odd addresses Monday, Wednesday, Friday, even addresses Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Watering only between 6 p.m. and 10 a.m. We don't be watering in the middle of the day. However, what these code changes do is they allow us to make that transition away from just a voluntary to a mandatory if the drought persists, gets worse, we potentially see significant water supply issues, things like that. We'll have the updated code language in place that really mimics what what we see across the Front Range and has been in place for many, many years. I think it's just a relic of the old code that we just haven't spent time on because we hadn't been in a significant drought like we are now. Our communication for this is bill inserts, websites, social media posts, potentially some additional ways. We want to get the word out. We want to give people the opportunity to we want to help them figure out ways that they can conserve water because it's helpful for everyone. The graph that's shown here actually shows why we have the systems we have, because the water system that we have. Because if you look July and August, we put a lot of water on the ground. This is what happens all across the Front Range. So we're no different than what other cities do. Our water systems are essentially built to handle the peak of irrigation season, which is the July-August time. If you look at the normal indoor use, that's the orange. The indoor use stays pretty constant throughout the course of the year. We see the peaks in the summer. This graph actually, we've included this because this is the statewide snowpack graph, and you can see the line that is at the bottom there that doesn't look very good is actually our snowpack and runoff actual information. I believe this is a couple weeks old, but you can see the blue is the maximum, the red was the minimum, and you can see where this year's snowpack is falling in terms of the historic nature and how much farther below the median is, which is that green. So these proposed code changes they're proactive, they're not reactive. They align with our regional peers and what you see across the Front Range from a best practices perspective. It provides more clarity and authority in the enforcement structure and supports long-term water reliability and drought resilience. We presented this with the Water and Sewer Board on April 14th, and they recommended it.
Director, thank you very much for the presentation. Any questions from members of council? I have a few questions, and Member Russell, I'll get to you next. So I understand the code changes. So right now we're just asking for voluntary restrictions, which you specified in the presentation. So I guess my question is, at what point do we know that we have to move to mandatory restrictions? Are we looking to achieve some type of percentage savings from previous years? What is it that's going to trigger us to say, all right, now it's time for a mandatory?
I think it's actually probably more relative to the ongoing nature of the drought. I mean, I think it'd be more of a regional impetus, more than a usage drop associated with our community. I think if we start seeing a persistence of the drought, if it doesn't end this year and it moves into next year, I think that's when we really start looking at the possibility of going to mandatory, and part of that could be indicated by what seniority the calls are on the river from a water rights perspective. As we start seeing more and more water rights being called out of priority, that's an indication that we're in a worsening situation. I think I've said before, Englewood's water portfolio is quite healthy and strong. So I think really right now this is in place for us to pay attention and to monitor, and as we start to see a worsening from a regional perspective, front range perspective, I think that's when we'd start to come talk to the council.
Yeah, I understand that, but also I guess, how do we know that people are adhering to the voluntary restrictions? So if nothing really changes, then what was the use of the voluntary restrictions? Because we also have to take just into account, like, the impact that, just because we have the senior rights on this doesn't mean that we should leverage that as part of our, just our plan for conserving water this year. I'm just wondering, because I'm looking at that graph that basically shows, indoor use stays pretty constant throughout the entire year, but then you start seeing water go up in July especially. So to me, it almost seems like if we have this level of data, we should be able to say, oh, we want to see this peak at a certain point within the months of May, June, July, where we actually do see a net change from previous years.
Yeah, and I think we could actually provide that information relative to daily production out of the water plant. And so we hit peak production levels in the summer, and so that is a way we could, I guess, report out the effectiveness of the voluntary restrictions. Is if we are seeing that reduction. My concern right now, as it relates to establishing a goal, is I think we've discussed before. One of the challenges in Englewood water system is we still have 1,100 flat rate customers, which are non-metered, so we can't get the metered usage out of it. So we can go off of those macro indicators, which I would say is the production out of the plant, but recognizing whether customers are actually reducing by looking at metered data and things like that. We still have a challenge in the sense that we need to convert those flat rates to meters, which is something that we'll be talking about in the near future with council, because we think there's an opportunity now.
But there's still a method for us to see whether there is a drop based off the voluntary.
Yeah, I think we can go off the daily production of the plant and see, if that is going down, that would be an indicator of the effectiveness of the voluntary restrictions. Right. So that's something we can report out to Water and Sewer Board and the council.
Okay. Thank you very much, Director. Member Russell, go ahead.
Thank you. And I would think it's not only the flat rate customers. In the last 2 or 3 years, we've had trouble with the water system and measuring how much water even individual houses have. I've had people call me and show their bills, they're billed for zero water. So even though they're billed for zero water and we don't know what each individual house is getting, we still know how much water is going through the plant. Is that correct?
We know how much water is being produced by the plant. What we can't quantify is how much water loss there is, because there's a certain amount of water that goes through the plant, and then all water systems leak. Any water system out there leaks, and so there's a water loss number that we can't quantify because of that flat rate, because that essentially counts as a water loss because we can't meter it. As it relates to the issue of the 0 meter reads that were occurring during the time of the billing, this was about a year ago when we were having this challenge with the billing system. Part of those were related to changing from the old meters to the AMI meters. And so moving forward, we anticipate if a customer is on an AMI meter, which is an advanced metering infrastructure, if they're on that meter, they're going to get much more detailed and accurate flow data. So we're through 7,600 of the 11,000 accounts on that. The commercial accounts are something that we're working with them to change on commercial property. We're working with commercial properties individually on that. And then we have about 2,000 properties that are just difficult meter change out. So it's not a simple go to the meter pit, go into the house. It could be under crawl spaces, things like that, we've saved those, and that will be the next phase of that project.
Okay, so it's mostly the meters, and that includes the flat rate that deals with meters also, correct?
Yeah, so the flat rate initiative that we've been talking about for several years, we needed to get through the lead program because we knew we were going to address some of the flat rates as part of the lead program. So we will be through that program by the end of the year. The next sequential step is to identify the remaining flat rates that are out there, and then incrementally put meter pits and meters on all those lines, so that in the near term, when I say near term, I don't have an exact timeline of how long that will take. A year or two is about what I'm expecting to get through those 1,100. At the end of that, we should have a fully metered system that we can actually really dial in what's happening with water use.
Okay, I appreciate that. And just, I shared this with the Water and Sewer Board. I have lived in Englewood a long time. We have rationed in the past, and the people in this city are more than willing to limit themselves. We don't have to control them. We just make the need known. And as a matter of fact, I don't know if it was back in the 80s or whenever, people saved so much water that the utility department couldn't pay their bills, so they had to raise water rates. And that's what I expect to see. I have some concerns about some things in here, like if a person ends up watering when we go, and I'm assuming this is when we go to mandatory,
sure,
that if they end up getting caught watering outside of their time, their water will be turned off. That could be a health and safety issue to a home where there was children or seniors. And I think that is overkill. I think there ought to be severe fines, but I think we need to be careful. And if we're going to have to start conserving water, which I assume we are, but a lot of times April and May could be our most snowy months. And I hope we do get more snow. But there are things I think the city ought to do too. Is Pirates Cove on a water meter?
I believe they're on. I'll have to go check. I have to check exactly what part of Pirates Cove is on a meter. So I wouldn't want to answer that definitively yet, but we can get that information.
I mean, I'd just be curious, not necessarily with the grassy areas there.
Sure.
I'd be concerned about how much water we're putting in the pool. And if we really need to conserve water, does it make sense to build a fountain area this year? Because water features are the greatest loss, even more so than watering turf. So I think there are some things we probably consider there also.
Thank you, Member
Thank you.
Russell. Who was next? Was it Mayor Pro Tem or Mayor Pro Tem? And then was it Member Bethel and then Member Frank? So, okay.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. My question is on something that Member Russell alluded to, but what this ordinance would give us the power to turn somebody's water off. What would happen? I mean, there is the ability to have a mandatory water restriction in the code now. What are the penalties available to us if we don't change the code?
So that is a question that I am going to have to defer to our city attorney's office on. Because I think the idea here, and I might defer to the city attorney.
City Attorney, are you online or Assistant City? I'm not sure who wants to take this one.
I would need City Attorney Niles to be able to speak on this one. I don't have direct knowledge of this.
I am online, but could you repeat the question, please?
The question is, if we don't change this ordinance, there is the ability in the code to do a mandatory water restriction. Just not, it looks to me like we're not allowed to shut water off. What are the penalties available to us under the current code? Is it, I'm assuming it's general penalty, I don't know.
Yes, I believe you're right. Our general enforcement provisions would apply, which would authorize us to write citations into municipal court and makes it a criminal matter rather than a civil or administrative matter.
And I think what this is, these code changes do, just reading through the section 12, 1A, 6 irrigation and water use restrictions, is it more clearly defines the mandatory and enforceable violations, constituted violations of this chapter in a form of waste of water. And so I think it more clearly ties it to a waste of water provision, which then gives us the ability to go with the penalties that are already in place under the chapter. The reason for these changes were to take what was older, less clear language and just add more clarity around being able to implement clearly mandatory restrictions at the time that it was deemed necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Member Bethel and then Member Frank.
I want to echo what Member Russell called out here, that to go so far as to shut off the water to an account, I think is far too drastic. So much so that a home without running water is no longer habitable by Colorado state law. So I wonder, I mean, I just feel like though legally we couldn't enforce that. So I'd love to see that removed. I do think that this is extremely important, especially considering Englewood's senior water rights. Our stewardship of our water resources is meaningful. And as other communities in the Front Range are facing water shortages, we might not be in a place where we're feeling those yet, but we will. And we will feel those alongside of our community members outside of Englewood. And I'd also like to see us in a position where we are able to help should, Denver Water need to purchase water from Englewood, if that is even, a possibility. I'd like to make sure that we're set up and able to render aid if other communities are in need. But the most important thing here is that we should not be able to cut off water to an account.
Thank you very much, Member Bethel. Member Frank.
Thank you, Mayor. I am going to join in the voices that feel like the water shutoff is a little too strong of a measure. I wouldn't mind seeing hefty fees. I also struggle a little bit in that section with the ability to shut off water with reasonable notice, and that is just not defined at all. So I feel like there's a lot of room for staff interpretation on what that is, and I'm not sure that a measure so strong as turning off someone's water should be left to interpretation. I did have a couple of other comments. One, I like the work on this, and I like where it's heading. I don't like that piece of it. I do think that if we move to a mandatory situation, that this must be communicated differently in addition to the 3 areas that were identified. So the social media, bill inserts, and website. I think if we did get to a point, and I struggle with that a little bit because I envision us like sending some sort of communication to every home, and then I'm like, well, environmentally, that's not really. It's a little contradictory what I'm saying, but moving to a mandatory situation requires a different level of communication, whatever that looks like.
Yep.
Um,
And actually, just on that, so the bill inserts, the website updates, and the social media posts. That is the communications that we are going to do now. We have also discussed just sending out an informational mailer to, because that sometimes gets people's attention differently when they see it as a individual postcard.
Yeah.
So we've talked about doing that as well to just get this on people's radar. Even the voluntary, just to get it on their radar.
I think that would be helpful. I guess I would also add that I still sometimes see issues with the information that's on the insert for the bills not being timely. So, receiving notices of things that have already happened. So I definitely think a separate communication is warranted. And then I guess my last curiosity on this really has nothing to do with how the proposal is written. But have we thought of other creative ways to incentivize people to do more voluntary conservation of water? And I would disagree with Member Russell. People do not police themselves, and I've been watching for the last handful of weeks how dry it is and people really overwatering. So I would love to feel like our public would be compliant, but I think I see lots of examples that are to the contrary. But I'm wondering, could we do some incentivizing in as far as like how we charge for water for instance, properties that have removed turf? Or like there's a certain percentage of their turf that's been removed and they've xeriscaped or done other things that don't require watering. Because I see that we don't have a clear mechanism to determine whether people are watering for outdoor use or indoor. It's like we see the flat line for indoor and then we've got those spikes to indicate, but we don't really know that for sure. But I would think a property who doesn't have grass to water, we can make some assumptions there. And so is that something that could be considered into the future?
So yes, all of it are things that we are looking. The first, as it relates to incentive programs, I think there's a turf removal program that we support, and I believe that's annually occurring this year as well. And so that's an incentive for people to remove turf, and they get a monetary incentive. Garden in the Box is another program that we support that helps people with native landscape. Those are two that we do today. As it relates to the indoor use versus outdoor use, one of the things that we will be bringing before the council at some point in the next year is a change to our rate structure. Because our rate structure, as many of you have heard you say before, is the last declining block rate structure in the state. So what that means is in the city of Englewood, if you use more water, it gets cheaper. Whereas everywhere else in the Front Range, everywhere else in the state, as you use more water, it becomes more expensive. It's a relic of the 70s and 80s when these structures were put in place. The first block, I believe, goes up to 100,000 gallons. And so essentially there's no incentive built into the rate structure to conserve water because most people don't use 100,000 gallons in a month. And so what we actually have studied, and we've already done a lot of the work on this in the background, is a change to a more traditional inclining block rate structure that we would bring to council that would have multiple tiers. So you'd have essentially the base tier, which is your indoor use. And so that's what everybody would typically use at an indoor usage level. And oftentimes you see that as 5,000 gallons in a month, typical across other water utilities. And then as you use more water, the cost per thousand that water goes up, so that if you're a high water user using 50,000 gallons in a month, that tier becomes really expensive. So what that's doing is it's shifting the cost burden of that peak of the water system to the people who are putting the pressure on the most pressure on the water system through that use. Again, one of the difficulties with that is with the flat rate customers, we can't do any of that. That's just built into their rate. And so that's why it's one of those things that we also need to fix. So these are, so the answer to your question, I think the broader answer to your question is we're looking at all of it to try and move away from the older systems that have been in place for decades to systems and structures that meet what you see across the front range. The reason this is coming right now is because of the immediate drought that's occurred more recently. So that's popped this part of it to the top of the priority list. The other pieces we have been working on in the background, and we will be bringing to council in the near future.
Okay. And I appreciate that. And I think it's that examination and that conversation amongst council is needed. I still like the idea of smaller scale incentivizing the conservation, largely because then people, it's harder to feel that buy-in as a community member when you're just talking rates. But if I can say, oh, I've torn out my lawn and I've done this and this instead, and look at me being responsible to our city and the region as a whole as far as my water usage, I think there's a different level of pride that can exist with strategies like that. So continue to noodle on that, I guess.
Yeah, we'll look to see what other communities are doing, because maybe there's I'm sure there's other incentive programs that are out there that we haven't looked into. So we'll check out what other people.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Pring. And I've argued that we should be collecting metrics on people that have used garden in the box or torn out their turf. Those that do happen to have meters, we're able to see what they were using prior to post, and we should be highlighting the people that are doing that. So,
can I just add that this is why AMI as a program is so incredibly important, because AMI gives the customer a really a lot of visibility into their water use on a daily basis, so they can really dial in with the dashboards and the ability to see what their usage is. They can understand much clearer than 15 days after a month of billing has been, a meter has been read, and then we send the bill out 15 days later, and then they can see what they were using in the beginning of July. AMI allows you to look on July 7th and say, how much am I using? And so that's one of the exciting things about shifting to that program.
But Director, we should be doing that as a city level. So we should be doing that at the city level as well. So, Member Ward, go ahead.
I just wanted to take a moment to concur with the other concerns that shutoff seems like the nuclear option to me. It doesn't seem fair to effectively shut down somebody's home for misuse of water. And I would support as a solution something more oriented towards I don't want to say penalizing use, but incentivizing less use, altering the billing structure in a manner that facilitates heftier costs being applied to people who are wastefully using water.
Thank you, Member Ward. All right,
Can I just add on the on the shutoffs? So the main reason why we shut people off is non-payment. And so, I mean, it really comes back to, that's where we typically use shut off, is when a customer has just not paid their bills, and there's a long period of time before we get shut. So I think this was just trying to tie that ability in the case of egregious offense, that there is that possibility. But really the where we use it the most is for non-payment.
All right, thank you. Member Russell, and then I'll ask for a motion. Go ahead,
All right,
Member
thank
Russell.
you, and I appreciate that. I totally understand if people haven't been paying their bill, that's one thing. I have a couple of suggestions, because I think this probably would be far more effective, is using radio and television, especially the news media, to announce that we are on voluntary water restrictions and the list of it. That's what they used to do back in the 80s. That wouldn't cost us. The news media is a public outlet and should be. And I think other cities should probably use that also. Member Prang, I think there probably are people in the city that have no idea that we are even talking about voluntary restrictions. I think if they know that we are doing it as a city, I do feel like they comply for the most part. There probably are people. Now, we have cut back. We've got some dead spaces in our lawn, but I don't want to let our lawn die. But we have a lot bigger yard than most people, and so it's going to be difficult. But I'm into conserving, and so I appreciate that.
To that point, we can actually add press release to we can do a press release on this to the news agency.
Okay.
Member Prang, did you have another question, or?
I have what I think would be a quick question. I received a question while we were talking from a community member, and they were asking about the implications to businesses. So if we were to go to a mandatory water restriction for businesses like car washes, would there be any potential implication to a business like that if we had restrictions between certain hours?
I don't know that I can answer that right now.
Okay.
I think with some of those, so water intensive businesses, what we would look to ensure is that they're doing it in the most water conscious way possible. So a car wash is just one of those things. It's a water intense business. You see a lot of car washes that recycle their water, and so it goes through and it goes through multiple times. And so I think in that instance, if we got to the point of mandatory and we're looking at what the result is on the business community, we would have to probably look at it specific to the type of business and the water intense nature of the business.
And so our city staff would go out and have individual conversations with those businesses to kind of talk through the nuances?
Yeah, and I mean, really, that's one of the challenges right now with going to mandatory is we're not staffed up to it. So if neighbors start calling out neighbors and saying, hey, I saw someone watering on the wrong day, we don't have the staff to go out and follow up on that right now. So that's if we do go to mandatory, that is another piece of that will come. This is really that first step to get us that ability to make that shift easily if we need.
Okay, thank you.
All right, with that, everyone, it's good conversation. Can I get a motion to approve 11A2? I think there may be an amendment in there.
I will move to approve 11A2, and we can have that amended afterwards.
Thank you very much, Member Bethel. Could I get a second?
Second.
Thank you very much, Member Summerson. All right. Are there any amendments here? I know that just the aspect of the shut off, I think, is what troubles most people. So go ahead, Member Ward.
I move to amend section 12(1A)(9), right to shut off water, to revert to the existing code and remove all changes to that section.
Thank you very much, Member Ward.
Second.
Thank you very much, Member Russell. All right. Can we vote on the motion, the amendment?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson,
Aye.
Member Bethel,
Aye.
Member Prang,
Aye.
Member Russell,
Aye.
Member Summerson,
Aye.
Member Ward,
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
All right, thank you. Anything else from members of council? Go ahead, Member Russell.
I did not highlight this. Is there where it says when we would go to mandatory? City count, is it 12(1)(a)(6)(b)? When necessary to protect the city's water supply. So currently it is city council that decides to do that, correct?
Correct. And I believe that would be in a form of that would be just a resolution, correct? Yeah, it'll be a resolution. So mandatories would come in front of council in a form of resolution.
Okay, so the mandatory isn't in here, it would have to come
Correct.
before us. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So we're good with that, Member Russell?
Yes, thank you.
So that'll stay as needed. All right, with that, everyone, if there's nothing else, can we please vote on the motion as amended?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson,
Aye.
Member Bethel,
Aye.
Member Prang,
Aye.
Member Russell,
Aye.
Member Summerson,
Aye.
Member Ward,
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
All right, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Director Van Bry. Appreciate it. Moving on to Council Bill 26, we have amending municipal code regarding the city's petitioning processes. City Attorney Niles, you're online. Do you want to kick us off on this item?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Normally on a second reading, I would just ask if you have any questions, but we have received some public comment and some emails about what this ordinance is about. So I will just give a little bit of background and response and then ask for questions after that. So this project was intended to put the statute, constitution, municipal code, charter, elections commission's rules, and our current practices in one easy to find place so that citizens can easily read and understand the petitioning requirements in Englewood for initiative, recall, referendum, and charter amendments, because currently they are all over the place. We've received some comments and questions about the ballot title setting and proposed changes to that process. Currently, City Council sets a ballot title on proposed code amendments or charter amendments. And so our current process is City Council reviews the language that the petitioners want to insert into code or charter. And then City Council decides what the actual ballot title or ballot question will be. And then that's what the citizens see on the ballot, and that's what they vote on. The current process has that occurring at the very end of the petitioning process. So the petitioners already have gotten petitions, given them to everyone, gotten signatures, and then they bring it to City Council. The problem with that is the people that sign the petition don't get to see what that ballot title is when they sign the petition, and it happens so late in the process that it can often be too late for them to challenge that ballot title and still make the election. So the proposal is to move the ballot setting process to the beginning of the process, to move it to a 3-person committee that includes an election expert, a designee from the city clerk's office, and a designee from the city attorney's office, to then set that ballot title in a non-political process. It also provides parameters for the ballot title. Generally, that has to be accurate, straightforward, unbiased, can't be confusing. And then it has, because it's the beginning of the process, there's time to challenge the title. And it specifically has a very short timeline to challenge the title and to have a hearing and to get the title set if they aren't happy with what the committee came up with. And then one additional benefit is the ballot title can then be included on the petition so that everyone that signs the petition sees this fair and unbiased ballot title, which can reduce the likelihood of misleading people to obtain signatures. So that's why we made the changes to that process. We've also received some comment on withdrawal of signatures and why there's included a process to withdraw signatures. It currently has been our practice to allow people to withdraw their signatures, but there's not clear parameters for doing so. In the last election cycle, a voter contacted the city, informed us that they were misled in signing a petition, and demanded that we remove their signature. We did so, and it didn't impact petition sufficiency, but this would insert that process that we followed into code. It simply says that anyone can withdraw their signature, and they have a deadline to do so prior to the clerk's certification of signatures. If City Council is concerned about shenanigans or nefarious actors attempting to impact a petition process, we certainly could amend it to beef up these sections, because the purpose of this project is to give maximum effect to petitioners and people using those petition processes, certainly not to detract from anyone's rights. So if council is concerned about that, we could perhaps amend to limit the basis for withdrawal to a violation of the municipal code sections that are in this ordinance for unlawful act, such as misleading someone to sign a petition. Or we also could move up the deadline to withdraw signatures to an earlier point, perhaps prior to petition filing. So this would mean that the petitioners could perhaps know that they need to get some more signatures, that somebody's withdrawn. So with that, I would welcome any questions you may have.
City Attorney Niles, thank you very much for that. Any questions for members of council? All right. Member Russell, go ahead.
So we really only had one person that complained that they had been misled, correct?
Yes, that only one that I've worked on. Yes.
Okay. And I don't know, I'm not really sure that maybe all this information needed to be put in one space for the people, because there have been at least three successful petitions in the last 3 years. So the citizens have been able to figure it out. I think this is probably unnecessary. And one of the things, the referendum was frustrating, but that was more because of the process afterwards. So one person complaining that if there were a lot of people complaining that they had been misled, but the truth is, we have a responsibility. People don't have to sign petitions, and I really am troubled by that particular piece. They need to prove in a court of law. What this is doing then is making the petition carrier responsible to prove they're innocent, rather than the individual to prove that they were misled. I think it's a non-issue, and somebody wasn't happy with it, and that's what happened. But so that was my one question. You answered it. Thank you, City Attorney Niles. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Member Russell. Any further questions for members of council? Go ahead, Member Summerson.
I appreciate the part on the wanting the ballot title to be earlier in the process so that it can be on the petitions, which I do think is helpful and does lead to less opportunities to mislead if that's happening, or just takes some of that out of the equation by doing that. I guess I'm curious on the time frame to deliver the ballot title. Like there's 10 days, I think, for the city clerk to do the review and then provide information back. And then the ballot title is in the next section. So I'm trying to understand the time frame of when a petitioner might expect the ballot title.
Right. Yes, I'm just scrolling up to that section to make sure I get it exactly right.
I think it's 115.3D or something like that.
Yes, so the ballot title, first, the city clerk determines that the petition meets the requirements of a petition or a question on the petition. Um, This one, we kept the committee small because we would want it to move very, very quickly. So it does not have a specific timeline for when the ballot title must be submitted. We anticipated that it would be less than a week because it's just 3 people that would need to make that determination. And then it's more the protest period that we wanted to keep very, very short because currently a protest period does not have these very short timelines. And so it's the protest period that was the 7 days to protest, and then let's see. Okay, sorry, it's a 16-page ordinance, so I'm reviewing it very quickly again. Yes, I was right. The protest must be filed within 7 days, and then the hearing must be held within 7 days. So that's what we anticipated. That would be that 14-day petition process. And then again, we anticipated that the ballot title setting process would be very quick because it's a very small committee, if you will.
Thank you. I think what I'm trying there, some of the concerns that were expressed were around the hold up to then begin collecting signatures and the time frame there. So I guess I just make anything that can help define what the time frame is so that folks understand, I think is just helpful in this process.
Mm-hmm. Our goal was to make it very fast because the current process, we bring it to city council that adopts legislation. And then we have to wait for a council meeting and we have to get the agenda published. So that can often take several weeks. And so our goal was to make sure it was significantly shorter than the current process because our goal in this entire project was to make it faster and easier for people to exercise their right.
Any further questions from members of council? Go ahead, Member Russell.
So is the process still the same as far as a citizen or group of citizens would write ballot language that they want, and then they would bring that forward, and then it goes to the title, or is that how the process would work?
Yes, the process would be the same, except once they submit their paperwork to the city clerk, then the city clerk, she determines that it meets the requirements of our code, which are the same requirements that we have now. Then instead of her issuing them a petition for circulation, she would then call this committee to action to meet and set the ballot title, at which point the ballot title would be published on the website and put on their petition. They'd be given 7 days to protest, and then they could circulate that petition, knowing that the ballot title is final, that there wouldn't, after they do the hard part, which is really circulating the petitions and getting hundreds, if not thousands of signatures, then trying to battle over a ballot title, it's all done at the front, so they know it's final before they put in the hard part, which is hitting the streets and talking to citizens.
So then if they didn't agree with the ballot title, the group of citizens, they would protest to, yes. And would the protest come to the 3 members that set the ballot title?
No. So we anticipated that in such a protest that would not be appropriate. So we wrote that it has to be someone independent, not a city staff member, but an independent hearing officer that would preside over the hearing to determine if the ballot title is appropriate.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Any further questions from council? Go ahead, Member Summerson.
Sorry, just one other point of clarity. In that same section, so D4, the petition form, it's all part of that review where the city clerk does, it appears, presents the final form of the petition to the petition representatives. And so the ballot title, I guess I'm confused as to when the ballot title then, if the ballot title is intended to be done in a way that then it's part of the presentation of the form to the petitioners, then the clerk can't complete their full review of steps 1 through 4 until the ballot title is done. Unless I'm misunderstanding.
Yes, so this is the current process, this petition form timeline. We would anticipate that the ballot title setting would occur as the clerk is approving the petition as to form, so that they could be complete at the same time. That would be what we anticipate, so that it can be on.
Okay, I think that just goes back to the clarity or lack of clarity in the as it's written then, and just in terms of the time frame and what people could expect.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right. Anything further from members of council? If not, can I get a motion to approve 11B1?
Move to approve 11B1.
Thank you, Member Bethel. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Any further comments on CB 26? Go ahead, Member Russell.
Thank you. I intend to not support this. I believe that Ms. Bailey had a very clear delineation of why City Council should not approve this. I agree with what she has said, and I thank her for the time that she took to address this with us.
Thank you very much. Member Summerson.
I'd like to move for an amendment to clarify the delivery of the petition form and the ballot title timeframe.
City Clerk or City Attorney, would that be a part of the amendment, or is that just something that we would just improve as part of the process, the timing? Because that's not. Go ahead.
I'm happy to respond to that. I was actually going to reach out to Councilmember Summerson directly to let him know that our next step, if this is adopted, is to create a guide to citizens, and that's where we could address that clarity on that timeline. But we also could do it through amending this ordinance to also require that 5-day time frame for the ballot setting title, and specifically refer to it below.
Thank you very much, Member Summerson. So, Member Summerson, you want to go ahead and amend the code, correct? Or amend the ordinance?
Yes.
All right, thank you, Member Summerson. Can I get a second on that for our members of council?
Second.
Thank you very much, Member Prang. All right, so we are going to amend it to, did you say it was a 5-day time frame? We're just going to clearly state it. City Attorney Niles?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, 5-day. All right, perfect. So any questions for members of council on this, on the amendment? All right, seeing none, can we please vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Aye.
Member Bethel.
Aye.
Member Prang.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Summerson.
Aye.
Member Ward.
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
All right, thank you. Anything else for members of council? Go ahead, Member Bethel.
Yeah, I'd just like to explain why I'm supporting this. There was a point made that this reorganization and cleanup isn't needed because there have been 3 successful referendums over the past 3 years. I wonder how many more there would have been should this information had been more easily accessed. I think that consolidating and placing all of this information in one place provides an ease of use for every citizen. That includes people that might not be as tech literate as others, and those that don't want to spend a week researching the best way to do something. So this to me reads as something that makes this information more accessible to our citizens and encourages the democratic process from a grassroots level. I think that in providing this tool, our city manager and city attorney, for that matter, our city attorney specifically, is working directly for our citizens to make sure that we are as involved as possible.
Thank you very much, Member Bethel. Member Ward, go ahead.
Just briefly on the topic of setting the ballot title in front of the process, there's a reasonable justification for that. And I've seen it within the past year in another municipality not too far from us, where some petitioners circulated a petition at significant expense because it was a large municipality and a large number of signatures were required. And they circulated the petition successfully, submitted it to the clerk. It was subsequently validated, but as it was being validated, a challenge to the title was filed with the clerk's office. And that ballot title challenge was successful. So what we have here is essentially arguably a violation of the right to petition that would not have occurred if the title setting process had occurred at the front end and the challenge had occurred prior to the proponents of the ballot initiative spending tens of thousands of dollars circulating the petition, getting signatures, and then being forced to spend even more money defending that petition unsuccessfully through the municipal process and through district court. Had all of that occurred at the front end, which is what we're doing here, that the question of whether the ballot title was fair or whether the petition itself was legally circulated would have been answered prior to them expending those funds. So it is in the best interest of our electors in this city. The bottom line is to set the ballot title ahead of the process instead of at the end of the process, because when you do it at the end, it opens a vector for a challenge after you've already performed all the work to circulate petitions, which could invalidate the petition itself in the end.
Thank you very much, Member Ward. All right, with that, everyone, since I see no further comments, can we please vote on 11B1 as amended?
Mayor Pro Tem Anderson.
Aye.
Member Bethel.
Aye.
Member Prang.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Nay.
Member Summerson.
Aye.
Member Ward.
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes, 1 nay.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. I have nothing for Mayor's choice, so City Manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Just two quick things based on the lateness of the hour. The Communications Department would like to take the first picture, I guess the only picture, of the current City Council, May 4th. And so if everybody can come prepared to take a picture, we're going to use the new photo studio here on the second floor, and we'll do it right before the council meeting. I'll get the exact time, but he just wanted to make sure that we knew that. Is anybody planning on being absent that meeting where we need to change that?
I'll be here. It looks like no one. Looks like we're all planning to be in attendance on the 4th. So.
Okay. And then we will also be taking individual shots as well, if everyone is amenable to that night. And then lastly, I just wanted to let council know that both Deputy City Manager Dodd and I have conflicts for the May 7th Budget Advisory Committee. I'll be at my niece's graduation in Texas, and he will be attending the police awards ceremony in my place. So we will not be able to cover that, but I talked to the finance team, and we'll have a full team for that meeting.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much, City Manager. Anything else?
No.
All right, everyone. So I will be out next Monday. I will be sure to provide some information on some of the agenda items up for study session that evening prior to that meeting, but Mayor Pro Tem, you will be leading that meeting. With that, everyone, we are now adjourned. Everybody have a good evening. Thank you.